Hello everyone, thank you for listening to my story. If you haven't fallen asleep yet, you might as well listen to this story, and maybe you will fall asleep soon. Before listening, please like and subscribe first. Of course, the premise is that you really like my content. If you have any thoughts or feelings, please leave a message below. Your opinions will really help me grow. Okay, enough chit-chat. Let's get started. The rain was pouring down like it was going to wash Los Angeles away. I took off my gloves and shook off my rain-soaked coat. My boots made a dull sound on the police station floor. Claire, Lucas looked up from his computer, looking even paler than usual. You'd better read this. I took the tablet he handed me. There was an encrypted email on the screen. There was only a photo attached. A young man standing behind the counter of a convenience store, wearing a blue uniform, and sorting the shelves with his head down. He had a smile on his face, looking defenseless. There is a clear countdown in the lower right corner of the photo. 72 hours, 0 minutes, 0 seconds. My heart suddenly sank. This isn't the first time. 3 weeks ago we received a similar email targeting an elderly person living alone. The address and time were all accurate to the minute. We deployed surveillance, arranged plainclothes officers, and even posted people on duty a day in advance. What's the result? 5 minutes before the countdown reached 0, the old man had his throat slit and died on the sofa in his living room. 2 weeks later, the same trick was repeated, this time with street singers. We blocked off the entire block and called in the SWAT team. But we were still one step too late. He fell next to his guitar, and the blood from his neck was all over the sidewalk. And now the third one. I stared at the screen, my fingers tightening. This is no longer a simple serial murder case, but some kind of ritual. Who sent it? I asked. Lucas was silent for a few seconds, then whispered, "It's an internal IP address, and it uses an old system port. That machine has been scrapped for a long time." I looked up at him. His eyes flickered, and he didn't dare to continue. I know what he's thinking. We all know what this means, but it's ridiculous. I took a deep breath and suppressed my emotions. "No, tight, Erica, and ask her to come over immediately." Erica walked into the task force meeting room at 2 in the morning. She was wearing a windbreaker, her hair was wet and stuck to her cheeks, and she was holding a cup of hot coffee in her hand. "Sorry we were stuck in traffic," she said as she sat down and opened her notebook. "Let me see the photo you mentioned." I pushed the tablet over to her. She looked at it carefully for a few seconds, then suddenly frowned and zoomed in. "Here," she pointed to a picture on the wall. "This is Sagittarius in the Zodiac." I was stunned. "The murderer is imitating the Zodiac killer," she said calmly but firmly. "He is not just trying to kill people, he is playing a cat-and-mouse game. The choice of prey, the timing, and even the way it is sent all emphasize that I am in control of everything." I clenched my fist so tightly that my nails almost dug into my palms. "This is no ordinary criminal. This is a person who is extremely intelligent, extremely calm, and extremely enjoys the feeling of being in control. Not only does he want to kill people, he also wants us to know that he is watching us and teasing us. He wants to break the police," Erica whispered, "or force us to do something." I stared at her, my heart turning cold. "Find out the connections between these victims," I said. "It's already being done," Lucas interrupted. "So far they don't know each other and have completely different professional backgrounds. The only thing they have in common is they all live in the Santa Monica area." I nodded, feeling vaguely uneasy. "Check their social networks, family backgrounds," and I paused. "I want their activity records for the past month." Lucas nodded and quickly typed away on his keyboard. The conference room fell into a brief silence. Only the rain outside the window was still hitting the glass, like an invisible countdown. At 6 o'clock in the morning, the door of the director's office opened. Deputy Director James Green sat at the end of the long table, tapping his fingers lightly on the table with a cold look in his eyes. "Claire," he began, his voice slow and steady, "I know you've taken over this case. I hope you understand that the public's trust in the police is eroding." He paused, his eyes flicking to Erica and Lucas, who were standing behind me. "This is the third time. People are starting to panic and the media are asking questions. I don't want to see a fourth one." He stood up and walked to the window, his back facing us. "I'll give you 72 hours. I clenched my teeth and said nothing. "If you fail," he glanced back at me, "not only will your position be at risk, but the image of the entire police department will suffer a serious blow." "I know who he is hinting at. The top brass doesn't want any more scandals. I don't want to be exposed anymore. I don't want anything to shake the system." "I understand," I replied in a low voice. As I turned to walk out of the conference room, I heard Green's voice behind me. "Claire."
I didn't look back.
"Protect yourself." I stopped. Then he left without looking back. The corridor outside the door was dark and silent, and the rain was still falling. But I can already feel that this cat and mouse game has just begun. I sat in the chair in the office, my fingers tapping on the desk, my eyes fixed on the information on the computer screen. The three victims, a convenience store clerk, an elderly person living alone, and a street performer, seemed to have no connection. But I knew in my heart that there must be something hidden behind this. Lucas and Erica had already finished get off work, and only a few colleagues on night shift were left in the police station. The rain was still falling, hitting the window glass and making a crackling sound, like some kind of urging. I opened the background file of the third victim, and suddenly a name made my pupils shrink. Daniel Walker. He was the second victim, an elderly man living alone. But 5 years ago he appeared as a witness in the investigation records of the Audubon Park manslaughter case. I quickly pulled up the brief report on that case. It was an old case that had been sealed off, with almost no public information, and only some scattered internal briefings. I remember the news that year that the police mistakenly shot a young girl carrying a toy gun as an armed suspect. Later, due to insufficient evidence, the case was hastily closed, and the identity of the deceased was not even announced to the public. And now the case has come back again, in the most brutal way possible. I took a deep breath and continued scrolling. Suddenly, I discovered that the other two victims also had a subtle connection. The convenience store clerk had passed by the scene on the day of the incident, and the street performer had forwarded a post about the case on social media. This was not a random killing. This was revenge. The murderer's target was not ordinary people, but those who were related to the Audubon Park manslaughter case. He is not creating chaos, but clearing up. My heart beat faster, and my breathing became a little rapid. If this is true, then what we are facing is not an ordinary serial killer at all, but a person who is highly planned, proficient in criminal investigation procedures, and even has control over police resources. He understood our deployment rhythm, knew how we would react, and even the countdown seemed like a tease. What's even more terrifying is that he is among us.
I turned off the computer, stood up and looked out the window at the dark night.
The rain hasn't stopped yet, and the wind is getting stronger. Tomorrow, I have to dig into all the details of the Audubon Park manslaughter case. But before that, I have to be careful. Someone is watching my every move. The next morning, I arrived half an hour earlier than usual. The office was still empty, with only the occasional hum of a printer in the distance. I walked up to my desk and froze. There was a brown paper file bag on the table, with no seal and nothing written on it. I sat down slowly and opened the bag. Inside was a stack of yellowed paper documents, the original records of the Audubon Park manslaughter case. At the very bottom, there was a page of handwritten letter paper, with strong and vigorous handwriting. "They killed my daughter. Now it's my turn." That morning, I arrived half an hour earlier than usual. The office was still empty, with only the occasional hum of a printer in the distance. The rain was still falling, hitting the window glass and making a crackling sound, like some kind of urging. I walked up to my desk and froze. There was a brown paper file bag on the table with no seal and nothing written on it. I sat down slowly and opened the bag. Inside was a stack of yellowed paper documents, the original records of the Audubon Park manslaughter case. At the very bottom there was a page of handwritten letter paper, with strong and vigorous handwriting. They forgot about her, but she didn't forget about you. My heartbeat suddenly became disrupted. These words were like a knife stabbing out from the depths of my memory, piercing my chest unexpectedly. I recognized the handwriting. It belonged to Mark Reed, the father of the victim in that case. He should have been an ordinary community resident, but he was the deputy captain of the police station and an old senior whom I respected. He has kept a much lower profile since the case 5 years ago, but has never really left the front line. I thought he was just doing his duty, but now it seems maybe he's just waiting for us to forget, and he will not forget. I contacted Erica immediately. She was silent for a few seconds on the phone and said, "I'll be there soon." 10 minutes later, she appeared in front of me with a cup of coffee and a pair of rubber gloves. She put on gloves, carefully took out the page of letter paper, and spread it out on the table. "It's not a printout or a scan. It's real handwriting," she whispered, as she observed through a magnifying glass. "The strokes are even, and the structure is stable, which shows that the author is trained and at least not someone who wrote casually. Also, looking at the pauses at the end, you can tell that his emotions were deeply suppressed. He's not angry, he's resentful." "Can you confirm if it was written by Mark?" I asked. "I'm not 100% sure, but judging by the style, it fits the profile of a middle-aged male, right-handed, with a certain disciplinary background." She looked up at me. "Also, notice this sentence. You forgot her, but she didn't forget you." I frowned. "What do you mean? This isn't an ordinary revenge message. This is an imitator," Erica said. "Did you notice that the tone of this message is very similar to the early letters left by the Zodiac Killer? That kind of provocation with a sense of ritual." My heart suddenly shook. Yes, those countdowns, those photos, and even the rhythm of the crime, all seemed like a carefully planned cat-and-mouse game. The murderer not only mastered the criminal investigation process, but also deliberately created an atmosphere of "we are playing." And now this "we" may include Mark and me. I stood up and began to look through the previous investigation materials. Lucas also came and his face turned pale after seeing the letter. "This is impossible, Mark. Can you find out who sent the email now?" I interrupted. He nodded, quickly sat down, and opened his laptop. After a few seconds his brows were furrowed. "The source of the transmission was a decommissioned laptop," he said. "The one that Mark used before he retired. Keep tracking." He hesitated for a moment. "I can go deeper and see if there is any other backup data, but the system prompts that some video clips are suspected to be captured by law enforcement recorders." I nodded. "Let's check it out." Lucas didn't say anything else, his fingers tapping the keyboard rapidly, as if he was afraid that he would regret it if he stopped. I stared at the old case record, trying to find more clues from it. "Claire," Erica suddenly said, "have you ever thought that Mark doesn't need to hide in the dark? What's the meaning? He knows us too well. He knows our reaction time, how we will arrange things, and even what we will overlook, because he was once a part of us, even the one who led us." I closed my eyes and thought of Mark teaching me how to conduct a witness interview. His gentle voice, stern eyes, and the words he always said. "The police are not gods, but we must be absolutely sure." But what if he himself couldn't forgive that mistake? The phone vibrated. "It's Lucas's message. Found a video, but I suggest you watch it for yourself." I didn't reply, including the person who introduced me to the world. The rain is still falling outside the window, and the wind is getting stronger. I picked up my coat and prepared to go. Target Maria Gomez's home. She was the social worker responsible for assisting the victims' families at the time, and the only person who had contact with all the key figures. Today she lives alone on the edge of a slum, and few people remember she exists. But I remember. Behind that covered-up manslaughter case, perhaps there is not only the rage of an avenger, but also the secret of a silent witness. I'm going to ask clearly. I drove through the city's edge, the windshield wipers moving mechanically on the glass. The streets and alleys of the slums are like gaping wounds, dark, damp, and filled with countless memories that no one wants to be brought up. Maria lives in an old apartment building. The iron door at the end of the 4th floor has a mottled paint and half of the house number has fallen off. I knocked 3 times, no response. After knocking again, there was finally the sound of dragging chains. The door was ajar and Maria stood in the shadows, her eyes alert and tired. "Claire Hawke," she said hoarsely, "you're finally here." I didn't say anything, just nodded. She hesitated for a few seconds, and finally opened the door. The house was even shabbier than I thought. The walls are yellowed, the floors are badly worn, and the bookshelves are piled with case files and psychological counseling materials. She sat in a creaky chair with her hands folded in her lap, as if she had known I would come. "You know what I'm going to ask," I said. She smiled gently, but there was no warmth in her smile. "It's about that girl, right? The child in Audubon Park, 5 years ago." I sat down and looked into her eyes. "Do you remember when a man came to you? He wanted to know the details of the case, and even threatened you." Maria's expression changed and her eyes darkened. "How did you know?" she whispered. "Someone left a clue," I said. "I wonder who that person was." She was silent for a while, then slowly shook her head. "I don't know his name, and I didn't ask him, but he is not an ordinary family member. He is a policeman." My heart was shocked. "Can you describe him?" "A middle-aged man, about 50 years old, dressed in plain clothes, but behaved like a seasoned law enforcement officer. He was very polite when he first came, but later, he became more and more excited. He said, 'The truth should not be buried in the dust.'" I held my breath. "Did he leave any other information, like a badge number?" She glanced at me with a complicated look. "Yes," she said. "I remember it, because he looked me in the eye and said, 'Look, this is the number of justice.'" My heartbeat quickened. "What's the number?" "LAPD 2. I felt like I was nailed to the spot. "That's Mark's badge number." I stood up, my legs feeling a little weak. Maria didn't say anything more, just handed me an old envelope. "He left it behind when he left that day," she said. I didn't dare open it. I took the envelope, and inside was a yellowed photo. Audubon Park, one afternoon 5 years ago, with the sun shining through the shadows of the trees onto the grass. There is a person standing in the photo with his back to the camera, wearing a dark windbreaker. That man's figure was so familiar. I clutched the photo, my throat dry. "Thank you." I stood up and left. Maria walked me to the door and whispered, "Sometimes the scariest thing is not when the bad guys put on the uniform, but when the good guys forget why they put it on." I walked into the rain and my cell phone vibrated. "Claire, come back soon. Someone broke into the evidence room last night." I stepped on the accelerator. When I returned to the police station, Lucas was already waiting for me in the monitoring room. The picture started playing, and the time displayed was 2:17 in the morning of last night. A figure appeared at the end of the corridor, ran to the evidence room with skilled movements, and swiped his card to enter. The shot is blurry, but the figure looks too much like Mark. "What did he take?" I asked. "A law enforcement camera, number LAPD 8976. Lucas whispered, "The one we tracked before." I closed my eyes, and my mind began to piece together a horrifying picture. This is no coincidence. This was a carefully planned revenge, and the person next to me who taught me how to solve the case might be the ghost manipulating everything behind the scenes. The phone vibrated again. "It's Lucas." A new email has arrived. This time the target is your daughter. I opened my eyes. The screen lit up, and a photo appeared. Lily's smiling face stared at me quietly before the 72-hour countdown. At 6:17 in the morning, my cell phone vibrated in my pocket. I had just finished a shower, and water was still dripping down my hair. When I saw the caller ID showed it was Lucas, my heart suddenly rose to my throat. Claire. His voice seemed to come from the bottom of the sea. There's new mail. I almost rushed to my phone. The moment the screen lit up, I felt like I was electrocuted. It's Lily's face. She was wearing the blue pajamas she had worn before going to bed last night, leaning on the sofa in the living room, reading a book. The sunlight filtered through the gaps in the curtains, casting streaks of light and shadows on her face. The shooting time is shown as 04:32 in the morning, which is less than 12 hours ago. The countdown clearly shows. I stared at the number and almost stopped breathing. He came in, I whispered. He came into my house. Lucas was silent for a few seconds before he spoke. We checked, and there is no record of a break-in. Your surveillance camera went offline at 2:15 last night and was restored at 3:00 exactly 45 minutes later. It's him, I said through gritted teeth. Mark, can we trace it now? IP address, signal source. It jumped more than 7 times. He sighed. Finally located at the police station's intranet. He still uses the same encryption protocol. I slammed my phone on the table so hard that the coffee cup jumped. I had already enlarged the photo to its maximum size when Erica pushed the door open. She stood behind me and watched for a while, then suddenly pointed to the left side of the screen and whispered, "Look here." I looked in the direction she pointed, and it was a row of bookshelves behind Lily. On the top layer was a book with a dark blue cover, Introduction to Criminal Psychology. There was a sticky note on the spine of the book, with handwriting I was all too familiar with. "Mom, have you forgotten anyone too?" I was stunned. Erica slowly squatted down and said softly, "He is asking you if you have forgotten someone." My throat felt like it was being strangled, and I couldn't breathe. That night 5 years ago, in Audubon Park outside Los Angeles, what was supposed to be a routine manhunt turned into a scandal in which the police mistakenly killed a young girl. The team was led by marksmen at the time, but the whole incident was eventually covered up. The victim's name is Amy Rosen, and her birthday is the day Lily was born. I was not on duty that night, but I remember it very clearly, because the moment Lily was born, I held her in the hospital and cried like a baby. Thousands of miles away, a father knelt on the ground holding his daughter's cold body, questioning why he was wearing this police uniform. Erica patted my shoulder gently. "This is not a random target. He is trying to remind you of what he has lost." I closed my eyes and a yellowed photo appeared in my mind. Maria handed it to me. The photo shows the back of a person wearing a windbreaker, standing on the grass in Audubon Park. I am very familiar with that person's figure. That is the back of my instructor. It's Mark. At this time, Lucas rushed in again, holding a tablet in his hand, and his face was pale. I cracked that video. He turned on the player, and the picture showed a shaky image. It was dark at night, and there were faint flickering lights in the distance. The camera moves in slowly and someone is whispering in the background. Then a gunshot rang out. The picture shook violently and then froze. Then a recording came. "It's not an enemy, it's a child." It was Mark's voice, trembling and broken. After a few seconds, the screen went black. I sat in the chair, supporting my forehead with my hands, feeling completely hollowed out. I see. It turned out that he had no intention of hiding from the beginning. Every photo and every countdown he left behind is meant to allow us to step into his story, step by step. And the end point of this revenge is for me to watch him kill my daughter with my own eyes. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and headed out the door. "Claire," Erica called to me. "Where are you going?" "I'm going to see the director," I said without turning around. to request that Mark be placed under 24-hour surveillance. They didn't stop me, but they all knew that things wouldn't be that simple. When I pushed open the door of the director's office, there were 3 people sitting inside: the director himself, the deputy director, and old Wee from the discipline inspection section. "Sit down," the director said calmly. I didn't sit down and said directly, "Mark Reed is a serial murderer. He is locked on his next target, who is my daughter." There was silence in the room for a few seconds. The director spoke slowly. "Claire, I know you've been having a hard time lately, but we need evidence. I have videos, IP tracking, motivation analysis. All you have is speculation." The chief interrupted me. "Mark is the most senior deputy captain in our department, with 0 complaints in more than 20 years. You say he is the murderer. Can you prove it?" I glared at him. "Do you have to wait until my daughter dies before you're willing to investigate?" He sighed, his eyes complicated. "Without solid evidence, the stability of the team cannot be shaken." I stood there, my fists clenched so hard that they crackled. As I walked out of the meeting room, I looked back at the closed door. The rain is still falling. I stood at the end of the corridor, looking out the window at the gray sky. 72 hours, it begins. I rushed into the police station parking lot and stepped on the accelerator. The wipers flapped frantically, streaks of water on the windshield, blurring the street ahead. The phone was still in his hand, and the words "call ended" were displayed on the screen. Roy didn't answer the phone.
It's not that there is no signal, it's that he hung up.
My heart was beating so fast it felt like it was going to jump out of my throat. Lee should be in her 3rd class at school now. Roy is responsible for looking after her, and he will not leave unless ordered to do so. But the phone call just now, it was as if it was deliberately cut off. I didn't dare wait any longer, and rushed to school directly. The rain hit the car window with a dull sound, and the radio was still reporting on the missing cases in recent days. The anchor said, "The police have not yet announced any substantial progress." I slammed the steering wheel. "Shut up." There was no one at the school gate, and the police who were supposed to be on duty were nowhere to be seen. I rushed out of the car and ran to the wheelchair under the old sycamore tree near the school gate. It stood there alone, like a prop forgotten on the scene. I squatted down and touched the armrest of the wheelchair with trembling fingers. It was cold and wet, but there was no sign of any struggle or dragging. On the ground next to it, a pink Bluetooth headset was lying there quietly. It was the gift I gave to Lily on her 14th birthday. My eyes fell on the right tire of the wheelchair, and there was a small scratch. Before I had time to think, I suddenly heard the sound of chalk rubbing against the ground. I turned around suddenly, and there was nothing. But when I looked at the floor tiles in front of the wheelchair again, a line of crooked handwriting caught my eye.
"Now, do you know who she is?"
I knelt on the ground, tears mixed with raindrops falling down my face. His fingers slowly stroked over the words, as if he could sense the murderer's anger and obsession. Emmy Rosen, the girl who died on that dark night 5 years ago, the child whose name never appeared in the official records. Her father, in police uniform, buried a countdown of 7 lives in this city, and the last photo was my daughter's face. It turns out that from the very beginning, he didn't want to escape, but to make everyone remember she once existed. I took a deep breath and forced myself to calm down. His fingertips still lingered on the line of words, but his eyes fell on the right rear wheel of the wheelchair. That scratch didn't look like it was left by the ground, but more like the mark left by the edge of some metal. I raised my head and looked at the empty school gate in front of me. Someone took Lily away, and they knew I was coming here. I knelt in front of the wheelchair, stroking the crooked chalk words on the floor tiles with my fingers. "Now, do you know who she is?" The rain has long since washed away the writing, but it becomes clearer in my eyes. Emmy Rosen, the girl who died of manslaughter 5 years ago. Her father, Mark, a veteran policeman with 25 years' experience in uniform, has now become our target. Where is Lily? I stood up, forced myself to calm down, and looked at the wheelchair carefully. There were water stains on the handrails, mud marks on the tires, and a little oil residue on the right rear wheel bearing, as if it had been dragged for some distance before being dropped here. This doesn't look like a kidnapping scene, more like she left on her own. There were footsteps coming from behind. It was Lucas. "What do you think?" I asked him in a low voice. He squatted down and shone the light of his mobile phone on the wheelchair. There are no signs of struggle, nor friction lines caused by forced dragging. If she was forced to leave, there would at least be shoe prints or traces of struggling on the ground. "She went with him of her own free will," I said. Lucas frowned, but didn't argue. I gritted my teeth, turned and walked towards the school building. Lily is missing, and the clues she left behind may be hidden in her home. When I got home, Erica was already there. She left something in the room. She handed me a piece of paper. It was a hand-drawn map. It wasn't very detailed, but it showed the old trails in Audubon Park and an abandoned observation tower. On the back of the map is written, "Mom, I want to know what happened that day." My heart felt like it was being pricked by a needle. Did she already know something? Or was she just curious? A 14-year-old girl's curiosity about her mother's secret world. "She's been looking into this," Erica said softly. "Maybe not to solve the case, but to understand why you're always so busy and anxious." I looked down at the map, and my throat tightened. "Did you find her?" I asked Lucas. He nodded and called up the location records on his phone. Lily's phone was last seen at the edge of Audubon Park. The signal lasted for about 3 minutes and then was disconnected. "Can you adjust the surveillance?" "I have contacted the municipal surveillance system." Lucas quickly operated the tablet computer, and after a few seconds, the picture appeared. A man in a hoodie, helping a girl walk into the woods. The man walked with a stiff posture. His left hand was always hidden under his sleeve, and there was almost no frontal exposure, but I recognized those eyes. "That's Mark." I clenched my fists tightly, digging my nails into my palms. "She didn't kidnap her," I said, my voice low. "He was waiting for me." Erica glanced at me and whispered, "This isn't a rescue game, Claire. This is his ritual. I know. He has set the stage. All that's left is for the protagonist to appear." I grabbed my coat and walked out. "Get the car ready." "Wait," Lucas stopped me. "You're planning on going alone?" I didn't answer, because I don't know the answer, but I have to go. Deep in the woods of Audubon Park, in that abandoned observation tower, is where I personally signed the seal 5 years ago. There is evidence, lies, and the truth that countless people are trying to cover up, and now my daughter is there. I started the car and drove towards the park. The wipers made a regular rhythmic sound on the windshield, like the footsteps of a countdown. However, 20 minutes after I set out, Deputy Chief Green received an anonymous call. "I'm here to alert you that Claire Hawke is acting on her own. She has bypassed the chain of command and is heading to Audubon Park. If you don't want tomorrow's headlines to be female sheriff abuses her power, I suggest you take action now." The phone call was hung up. Green stared at the unpublished investigation report on the table with a gloomy face. "This is a ticking time bomb, and Claire is moving closer and closer to the tipping point." My palms holding the steering wheel were already sweating, and the wipers were like a swinging pendulum, creating brief moments of clarity on the windshield. Deputy Director Green's instructions came over the radio, his voice as cold as a razor blade pulled straight out of an ice storage room. "Claire Hawke, your investigation privileges have been suspended. Please report back to the police station immediately. I repeat, report back immediately." I didn't turn off the radio, nor did I respond. I rolled the window down halfway and let the damp night wind flow into the cab, bringing the scent of fallen leaves and dirt to my face. I know what this path leads to. It is the truth that was sealed 5 years ago, the blocking order I signed with my own hands, and the wound that I must now tear open with my own hands. The phone vibrated in the passenger seat. It was the last message from Lucas. Claire, don't go in alone. We are dispatching support. Mark is not crazy. He has planned everything. I didn't reply, because I'm afraid that once I open my mouth, my emotions will burst. The entrance to the wooded area of Audubon Park had been blocked, but the rusty chain was no match for a police SUV. The sound of tires rolling over dead branches was particularly harsh in the silence. I stopped the car, drew my pistol, and checked the magazine. The cold wind blew across my cheeks, and for the first time I felt fear, not of death, but of the man waiting in the tower, and of the daughter who might never see tomorrow's sun. The map unfolded in my mind, and I followed the route drawn by Lily and went deep into the dense forest. The shadows of the trees were baring their fangs and claws like ghosts. My breathing became heavier, but my steps remained firm. Suddenly, I noticed several deep scratches on the trunk of an old tree in front of me. I took a closer look and saw that it was an arrow carved by Lily with her fingernails. It was crooked but clear, pointing to the deeper darkness. My heart skipped a beat. She is still alive. She is still waiting for me. Not long after I continued walking, I saw light, a faint light hidden behind a window of the abandoned observation tower, flickering like some kind of signal. I held my breath and approached quietly. The only sounds in my ears were my own heartbeat and the hum of some unknown device in the distance. I stopped, leaned against a tree, took out my small portable mirror, and looked around the corner. The tower door was half open, as if inviting me to enter. There was no other sound around, only the whimpering of the wind blowing through the empty corridor. I took a deep breath and pushed open the door. It was dark inside, and the air smelled of old wood and damp cement. The stairs creaked, and every step seemed to be on the edge of time. I slowly moved up, finger on the trigger, until I reached the top. The door was ajar. I stood at the door and heard whispers coming from inside the house. A familiar voice, soft and calm. "That's Lily." I closed my eyes, suppressed the emotions that were about to explode, and gently pushed open the door. The light from the room suddenly spilled out, illuminating my face. Lily sat on a chair in the corner, her expression calm, her legs crossed, and the wheelchair lying quietly beside her. And by the window stood Mark. He was holding the law enforcement recorder in his hand, and the camera was facing my mother and me, aimed at us. At that moment I understood. This is not the end. This is just the beginning. I stood in the doorway, my finger on the trigger, the muzzle of the gun drooping slightly. Lily sat in the corner with her legs crossed, looking so calm that she didn't look like a kidnapped hostage. Her wheelchair lay quietly beside her, like a superfluous object. Mark stood by the window, holding the familiar law enforcement recorder in his hand, with the camera facing my mother and me. "Welcome to the night 5 years ago." His voice was low and tired, but with a kind of resolute calmness. "Tonight we will no longer escape." Raindrops drifted in through the cracks in the shabby window, forming a blurry curtain behind him. He seemed to have been standing there for a long time. The floor beneath his feet was damp, cold, and hard. There were traces of carvings on the wall that were left by someone unknown. They were crooked and looked like some unfinished prayer. I didn't say anything, but slowly raised the gun and pointed it at his chest. "Put down your weapons," I said, my voice calmer than I'd expected. He smiled, and the wrinkles at the corners of his eyes looked particularly deep under the dim light. "You're still repeating what you said that day," he said.
You know, Amy was saying the same thing when she fell.
My heart suddenly sank. "Don't listen to his nonsense." Lily suddenly spoke. Her voice was not loud, but it carried a disturbing power. I turned to look at her. There was no fear in her eyes, only calmness and some emotion that I couldn't understand. "Mom," she whispered, "you always thought I was your atonement, but in fact you forgot the most important person." I was stunned. She took out a yellowed photo from her backpack and placed it gently on the ground. There were 2 little girls in the photo. One was my young Lily, and the other was a girl I didn't know, but the smile on her face was so familiar to me that it almost suffocated me. That's Amy. My breathing quickened. How did you get this photo? I contacted Maria secretly. Lily whispered. I always knew. My world began to shake. The tragedy in Audubon Park 5 years ago, the manslaughter that should not have happened, the avoidable accidental killing, and the truth that was covered up by the top leaders, all appeared clearly before my eyes at this moment. What I am most afraid of facing is not the past, but the person in front of me, Mark. He looked at me with complicated eyes. You think I just want revenge? He asked. No, Claire. I want you to see. He pressed the play button in his hand. The picture jumped. The black and white picture shook violently, and someone shouted in the background, "Put down your weapons. Put down your weapons immediately." Then there was a girl's terrified scream. Not a bad person. I'm just here to find my dad. Then there was a gunshot. Before the picture was interrupted, the back of the girl falling to the ground could be vaguely seen. I closed my eyes, my nails almost digging into my palms. Everything is clear now. Mark is not a madman. He is a father, a policeman, and a man who once believed in justice. But when the system he was involved in covered up the death of his daughter, he also destroyed his own beliefs. I opened my eyes and tears were already streaming down my cheeks. What do you want? I asked, my voice trembling. I want you to remember her, Mark said. I want the city to remember her. He slowly raised his hand, and the law enforcement camera was still pointed at us. Just like you remember every police officer who has died. I took a step forward, raising the muzzle of the gun slightly. Put it down, Mark. I have completed the ritual. He suddenly smiled, but his eyes were full of emptiness. Now you can end me. He turned the gun to his own temple. No, I yelled, my heart seemingly stopping. At that moment I took a step forward, and the rain dripped down the window frame onto the floor, making a faint but clear tapping sound. Mark, I called out his name, my voice trembling. If you really want Amy to be remembered, then let me take her back. Take her back to the sunshine. He didn't move, the muzzle of the gun still pressed against his temple, his eyes empty and tired. You're not going to make it, he said. They won't let you tell anyone. Then you'll live to see me do it. I gritted my teeth, my finger still on the trigger. But I didn't shoot. I knew that as long as I was standing, he still had a choice. Do you remember what I said that night? I continued, my voice becoming firmer. Justice is not a matter of a bullet. You were right, but you forgot that it is not a matter of personal revenge either. Lily sobbed softly beside me, but didn't interrupt us. She knew this was not the moment for her to intervene. The sound of sirens outside was getting closer and closer, and the wind blew the rain in through the dilapidated window, as if to tear apart the silence of the room. Mark, put the gun down, I whispered. Let me do for you what you couldn't do. Make her name remembered. He finally moved, his fingers trembling slightly, and the muzzle of the gun slowly moved away. I was so relieved that I could barely stand. The next second, the door was pushed open, and Erica and Lucas rushed in, followed by a support team armed with guns. Everyone is safe. Erica quickly glanced around and confirmed that no one was injured. Lucas walked straight to the body camera that was still recording, pulled out the memory card and carefully put it in his pocket. Mark stood there, like a statue without a soul. Do you know what they're going to do to you? I asked him. He smiled bitterly. I don't care anymore, but I care, I said, because you were once the person I respected the most. He finally raised his head and looked at me. There was a softness in his eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. I'm sorry, Claire, he said. I didn't mean to hurt your daughter. I just missed her so much. I hugged Lily tightly. She rested her head on my shoulder and whispered, Mom, are we all wrong? I didn't answer, because we all know that no one really wins. The rain was still falling, and a little light came through the window. The night is almost over. But behind us, the law enforcement recorder is still quietly recording the city's belated confession. Also recorded all the forgotten names. At 6:17 in the morning, the light in the interrogation room was so bright that Mark's eyes were sore. He sat with his head down, his hands cuffed to the edge of the table, like a criminal awaiting sentencing. I stood behind the mirror, looking at him through the one-way glass. For the first time in 5 years, this man was no longer my superior and mentor, but sat there, allowing others to decide his fate. Lucas imported the data from the law enforcement camera into the evidence system, and after confirming that it was correct, he said softly, "This may be the most powerful testimony in the past 5 years." Erica stood beside him with a complicated expression. "But this is not just evidence, it's also an accusation." I didn't speak. The room was eerily quiet, with only the low hum of the air conditioning vents. Mark looked up and glanced at me. There was no anger or regret in that look, only a deep tiredness. He was once the pride of the Los Angeles Police Department. During his 25-year police career, he personally trained more than a dozen outstanding detectives. And now he is just a father who lost his daughter. A ghost who tries to awaken the silent truth with a 72-hour countdown. "Did we win?" Erica asked me softly. I didn't answer, because I didn't know the answer. At 11:45 a.m., Deputy Commissioner James Green called an emergency press conference. The venue was packed with reporters, all with their cameras trained on the center of the stage. He was wearing a dark suit, his expression serious but restrained, trying to downplay the impact of insider involvement. "This case is an isolated incident," he said. "The police are handling the relevant personnel in accordance with the law, and we will ensure fair procedures." Before he finished speaking, a reporter interrupted him and asked, "Was the Audubon Park manslaughter case ever covered up? Did you deliberately conceal the truth from 5 years ago?" Green frowned and was about to speak when the picture on the big screen flashed and the live broadcast signal was suddenly interrupted. Everyone was stunned. The TV screen cut to the face of local TV anchor Catherine Blair, who was sitting in the studio with a serious expression. "Dear viewers, here is the special report. Ghosts in the police station. Who killed Amy?" The whole audience was in an uproar. Spread out in front of her was the full-body camera video. Mark's own account of the entire incident, everything he had told me in that shabby warehouse. Her voice was calm and firm. "This is not an ordinary murder case, but a carefully planned accusation. A policeman in his own way forced the entire system to face the mistakes he made. And today, we must ask a question. Who killed Amy?" The camera switched to a photo of Lily and me, where she was waiting for me to get off work at the school gate. This mother, also the head of the major crime squad, Claire Hawke. Her daughter almost became the 7th victim. I stood outside the venue, listening to the broadcast coming from TV, and my heart was filled with emptiness.
They got the video.
They exposed the truth. But are we really ready? It was already evening when I got home. Lily was arranging the bookshelf. The sunlight poured into the living room through the window, casting mottled shadows on her wheelchair. She looked up at me as I walked in with gentle eyes. "Will you quit?" she asked softly. Without even thinking, I shook my head. "No." She smiled and handed me the book in her hand. The cover has 4 words. The right to memory. There is a sentence on the back cover. True justice begins with admitting one's mistakes. I opened it and saw her crooked handwriting on the blank space of the first page. "Mom, I'm proud of you." I held the book for a long time without moving. It was getting dark outside the window, and the rain had stopped, but the wind still blew, carrying with it a damp smell, as if the city was still whispering its confession. The next morning, the city council announced the establishment of an independent investigation committee to review the Audubon case, and the responsibility of senior police officers. Before all this began, Mark was handed over to judicial authorities. But on the eve of the trial, to be continued, I stood in the middle of Audubon Park. The ground beneath my feet was newly paved with flagstones, the air still lingering with moisture from the rain. The memorial plaque is not big, but it is eye-catching enough, with only one line of words engraved on it. Amy Reed, we never forget. The wind blew through the treetops, bringing up a few yellow leaves. I looked down at the sign and my throat felt like it was blocked by something. We'll remember you, I said. I heard footsteps behind me, and a group of young people who looked like students came over, talking and laughing in low voices. One of them suddenly stopped and squatted down to look at the memorial plaque. Who's Amy? She asked. No one answered, but I heard one of the boys whisper, it seems to be the girl who was mistakenly killed 5 years ago. The sound was not loud, but clear enough to be piercing. I turned and left, feeling inexplicably relieved. At least her name is no longer a code name in the documents, nor is it an old page in the internal investigation. It was nailed here, in the sun, within sight of people. A few days later, the city council formally announced the establishment of an independent investigation committee to review the Audubon case 5 years ago and whether there was a systematic cover-up by senior police officials. Deputy Director Green has submitted his resignation, which has not yet been approved. Mark was transferred to the judicial authorities and is awaiting a formal trial. But on the eve of his trial, he wrote an open letter in prison and published it on the front page of a local newspaper. I'm not a judge, but I hope my crimes will be rewarded with a real trial. The letter contained no defense or accusation. He simply stated his motives and choices, and called on society not to ignore institutional failures. I didn't go to see him, not because I hated him, but because I didn't know what to say. Justice is never black and white. Sometimes it hides in anger, sometimes it hides in silence, and we, the law enforcers, were once its blind spot. When I returned to the police station that day, Lucas was waiting for me in the technical room. He left a notebook behind, he said. No one noticed it. He gave it to the guard himself and said he was going to give it to you. I took the notebook with a dark blue cover. On the back cover was a photo of his wife, Amy's mother. I opened the first page, which was filled with time, place, and lists of people. That was the timeline of the entire case, starting 5 years ago and counting down to 0. There was a brief note next to each victim's name, which sounded like his apology to them, and also like his confession. I turned to a page near the end and suddenly stopped. There was a line of words written there. On October 28, 2023, she will be back. The date is exactly 3 days later. I sat at the table in the interrogation room, my notebook open beside me. The dark blue covered book that Mark left behind weighed on my chest like a heavy stone. The words are still in front of my eyes. On October 28, 2023, she will be back. 3 days later, I didn't dare to act rashly and immediately contacted Erica. She didn't ask any more questions, just said, "Come right over." She was waiting for me in the behavior analysis room, holding a magnifying glass and a few pages of copy paper in her hands, her brows furrowed as if she wanted to crush time. This is not a countdown to death. She flipped through the records in the notebook and said in a low voice, "It's more like some kind of confession ceremony." What's the meaning? He is not setting goals, but marking nodes. She pointed to one of the pages. Look, this is marked as the starting point of the truth, and this is the beginning of the cover-up. His timeline is not to kill people, but to restore the whole process of the incident. My heart tightened, as if a needle was piercing my heart. Mark is not a serial killer, he is just a father-driven crazy. He is using the most extreme method to dig up a secret that was buried 5 years ago. I went back to my office, turned on my computer, and pulled up the original records from the Audubon Park manslaughter case from 5 years ago. Photos, transcripts, testimonies, on-site investigation reports. I reviewed them one by one, trying to find any details that I had missed before. Just then Lucas knocked on my door. "Team leader, I found something." He handed me a tablet with a blurry image, an unlabeled video clip from a backup folder of a body camera, The picture shows a corner of a park at night, with raindrops leaving fine traces on the lens. The figure walked in, a young boy with a guitar in his hand. Then he stopped under a tree, seemingly waiting for someone. Then the scene flashed, and another figure walked out of the shadows. He was wearing plain clothes, but the outline of a holster could be vaguely seen around his waist. "Who is that?" I asked. Lucas gritted his teeth and zoomed in on the picture. "It's Tom Renard, the wandering singer. Yes, he is dead. One of the latest victims." I stared at the other person in the picture. "Can you recognize who it is?" Lucas nodded, his eyes complicated. "It's David Cole." I was stunned. David Cole, who was not on the live roster that year. I grabbed my coat and headed out. The office of the transportation department was very quiet. David was sitting in the corner, writing something with his head down. Hearing footsteps, he looked up, without a trace of surprise on his face. "You're here at last," he said. "I didn't beat around the bush and just put the screenshot on his desk. Explain this video." He looked at the screen, his eyes dimming little by little. I don't know what day this is." "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice low. "You know the date I'm talking about. That night in Audubon Park 5 years ago." He was silent for a long time, and finally sighed. "That day, I received an order saying that a suspicious person sneaked into the park, but when I arrived, I only saw a girl running with a flashlight. I didn't shoot, but someone did." "Who fired the shot?" He shook his head. "I don't know. The order was given by my superior, and I was just the executor. I wanted to tell it, but then the wind changed. Everyone said she was a suspect, that she was an undercover agent of a terrorist organization. No one believed me." "Then why are you saying this now?" He smiled bitterly. "Because I felt like no one would listen even if I told them. It wasn't until you started investigating those old cases that I realized maybe there was still a chance." I stared at him, feeling mixed emotions. Justice is never a straight path. Sometimes it is hidden in lies, sometimes in fear. When I walked out of the traffic department, my cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Catherine Blair. "Claire, I thought we could talk. I just got a video that may change the public's opinion on this matter." I know what she's going to say. I know this storm is not over yet. I looked up at the sky and saw that the clouds were very low. 37 hours later. It was October. She will come back. What does this sentence mean? I have no idea, but I knew I had to find out. I sat in front of the TV and watched Catherine Blair's face appear on the screen. She was wearing a dark grey suit today, with the cold light of the TV news studio as the background. "Good evening, everyone." Her voice was steady and powerful. "Today, we bring you a video that has never been made public. It was shot 5 years ago in Audubon Park." The scene switches, and in the blurry night scene, a familiar figure appears. Tom Renard, the wandering singer, who was recently murdered. He stood under a tree, seemingly waiting for someone. Then, another figure stepped out of the darkness. Plain clothes, gun holstered, low profile. The camera turned and the name David Cole was marked at the bottom of the picture. The police officer, who was not on the list of responding officers at the scene that year. "Is this the first time you've heard this name?" Catherine's voice was slightly questioning. David Cole was one of the police officers who actually arrived at the scene that night, but he never appeared in the official police report. Next, she showed excerpts from David's testimony, and the audio content that Lucas recovered from the backup of the body camera. Every word was like a hammer hitting the public's trust. This was not a mistake. This was a premeditated cover-up. After she said this, the camera zoomed in and she looked directly at the camera. "LAPD, how long are you going to keep this secret?" Less than 10 minutes after the live broadcast ended, the city council issued an urgent notice requesting a closed-door meeting. Social media exploded, citizens were outraged, and "Give Amy Justice" quickly topped the trending search list. Deputy Chief Green looked uglier than I had ever seen him. He finally had to sign an order to fully open the archives, including the internal communication records that had been blocked that year. When I got back to the office, Lucas was already busy like a robot in front of his computer. Team leader, take a look at this. He pointed at the waveform on the screen. This encrypted voice was originally disguised as part of the system log, but after I decoded it, listen to it. A short sentence came from the headset. Target confirmed. Cleared. That was the director's voice. Without a doubt. I clenched the report in my hand, my throat dry. This is not Mark's revenge alone, nor is it the fault of individual police officers. This is a conspiracy of a whole set of mechanisms. Justice is not late. It is just locked in the archives. I stood up and walked to the window, and the rain started falling again. The city lights in the distance looked like stars sinking under the water. The phone vibrated. It was a message from Erica. Claire, we're dealing with more than just one murderer. I didn't reply to her. At this moment, I just want to find a place to quietly look through those old case files from 5 years ago. Maybe in some corner there is a secret that even Mark doesn't know. I stood at the door of the archives, rain dripping down the window. The air in the room was hot and humid, and the smell of paper and dust was overwhelming. Ethan Walker pushed up his glasses and handed me the cassette with the blurry label. "Are you sure you want to listen?" he asked. I didn't answer, just took the belt, my knuckles turning white. Lucas was already waiting in the tech room, and the equipment started working as soon as it was plugged in. Erica also came. She sat in the corner staring at the table. "Can this thing be restored?" I asked him. "Yes." Lucas didn't look up. "But it's not in a normal format. It has to be converted to digital audio and bypass a layer of encryption." "Hurry up then," he said, not fast enough, and continued typing. The waiting process is like torture. The rain outside the window was getting heavier, and the wind was blowing against the glass, as if someone was beating on it outside. Finally, the first voice came from the headphones. "Marks. The situation at the scene is chaotic and we cannot confirm the identity of the target." "You mean when you shot, you didn't even know who it was?"
Yeah, I thought she was the one with the gun.
"But the report says the target voluntarily raised his hands in surrender." There was silence for a few seconds. "This is not a mistake, David. This is an order." My heart skipped a beat. Then another voice appeared. "Deputy Chief Green, we must control public opinion and not let this become a racial issue. What about Mark? Let him take the blame. No one will believe the explanation of an old policeman." The recording doesn't end here. Further down, the voice of the former director also appears. "This case cannot be reopened. Once a clue is opened, we're done. Claire is pursuing this now too. She's so persistent. Then let her hit the wall. Don't let her get close to the truth." The recording is finished. The room was dead silent. Lucas took off his headphones and his face turned pale. Erica whispered, "This is not a cover-up, this is a systematic cover-up." I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. All I could think of were the scenes from 5 years ago. The girl in the news, the crying mother, and Mark's expression as he lowered his head to sign. It turns out that everything was acted out. "Green won't let me go," I said. Erica nodded. "He knows you are chasing him, but he is still holding back, which means he is waiting for an opportunity to strike back. So we have to take action first." Erica looked at me with a calm expression. "We can create some false news to make him think we have other evidence." "Like what?" "A letter. Anonymous report letter." When she finished speaking, Lucas and I both understood what she meant. If we spread the word that there is a letter of complaint from within the police department, Green will definitely be restless. He'll find out. Then we'll wait in the dark for him to make a mistake. I pondered for a moment and nodded slowly. "Then do it." Erica immediately began drafting the content. Lucas was responsible for falsifying the email routing and sending time. I called several reliable informants and suggested that they pay attention to the actions of the top brass in the municipal bureau. The plan has been launched, But none of us expected that my phone would ring the next morning. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number. I picked up the phone. A woman's voice came from the other side. "Captain Claire, this is Maria Gomez. I just saw you were investigating the case at Audubon Park." She paused and lowered her voice. "I have something to tell you about something that happened 5 years ago." I was stunned. "What?" She did not answer immediately, but said softly,
I got an email from someone inside the police department.
The phone call was hung up. I held the phone, my heart tightening. Who wrote that email? And that insider? Are you still in the police station? I sat at my desk, staring at the email on the screen. The title is Amy. There was only one photo attached. Lily was sitting by the window in the living room, holding a book, with sunlight shining in from the side of her face. Her hair was blown a little by the wind, and she was as quiet as that night 5 years ago. The countdown clearly read, 72 hours, 0 minutes, 0 seconds. My heart was beating like a drum, and my fingers were trembling slightly on the mouse. This wasn't Mark's doing. He has been controlled, and the format, encryption method, and even IP path of this email are completely different from previous ones. This is another person's work. But why Lily? Why now? I took a deep breath and opened the attachment. After enlarging the photo, I discovered a detail. In the corner of the curtain, there was a vague number. I immediately called Lucas. "Can you trace this email back to its source? The sooner the better. We're already checking it." His voice was filled with anxiety. "But this time it's different, Claire. It bypassed 3 firewalls and was sent from an abandoned node in our intranet." And he paused. "It was sent 13 minutes after you listened to the tape." I was stunned. "Who else has access to that node?" I asked. "Theoretically only the archivist, Ethan Walker." I stood up suddenly and rushed out of the office. The lights were still on in the archive room at the end of the corridor. I pushed the door open and saw Ethan sorting a box of old case files. He was a little surprised to see me. "Have you ever touched my computer?" I asked him directly. He was stunned for a moment and shook his head. "No." "Do you know what the number 13 means in the Audubon Park case?" He frowned and thought for a few seconds, then whispered, "Evidence box number 13 contains the original audio tape of the scene on the day of Amy's death." I was shocked. Wasn't that thing destroyed long ago? Nominally it was destroyed, but it's actually still in the safe in the basement, because an intern secretly made a backup. "Who is it?" "I don't know the name, I just know it's codenamed." I looked at him, and an idea flashed through my mind. What happened to that intern? Ethan lowered his head, and his voice became very soft. "He later died in a car accident." I turned and left. When I returned to the office, Erica was already waiting there. I showed her the photo and she frowned. "This is not a challenge, Claire," she said. "This is a warning." "What's the meaning?" "He is telling you that he knows your weakness. He also knows that you are getting closer to the truth." I clenched my fist so tightly that my nails almost dug into my palms. "But we haven't gotten to the heart of it yet." Erica was silent for a moment, then suddenly said, "Do you remember Maria? She just said she received an email from inside the police station." I nodded. "I want to see her," I said. "Right away." Erica looked at me with complicated eyes. "Claire," she whispered, "you have to be careful. This game has just begun." I stared at the countdown on the screen. My heart beat almost in sync with the constantly beating numbers. 72. The photo shows Lily. She is wearing the blue and white striped pajamas that I changed her into last night, and her hair is still wet. The background is the sofa in our living room, and hanging on the wall is the crooked family portrait she drew when she was a child. My fingers trembled slightly on the mouse, and my throat felt like someone was grabbing it. This wasn't Mark's doing. He has been detained awaiting trial, and his fingerprints, surveillance, and communication records all match. But this email, the format is different, the path is different, and even the IP is not the previous intranet node. but it is directly jumped from the municipal server. Lucas. I almost yelled, check. Check now. The sound of rapid keyboard tapping came from the other end of the phone. I have locked the first hop node, but the second hop uses dynamic encryption. Claire, this is not a simple tracking problem. This is professional.
What do you mean?
It means someone understands us. I stood up suddenly, and raindrops hit the window like countless knives scratching across the glass. Erica stood aside, holding the note in her hand. I know who you are. She spoke slowly. This is not revenge. It's a reckoning. I gritted my teeth and a name flashed through my mind. Roy. A patrol officer. He was transferred to support the logistics dispatch of the serious crime team 3 years ago, and was later assigned to be responsible for picking up Lily from school. Loyal and reliable. Or is it too good of a disguise? I rushed out of the office, and the rain instantly soaked my coat. I didn't even bother to hold an umbrella. I ran all the way to the police station parking lot, grabbed my car keys, and drove towards the school. On the way, I contacted school security and requested to see the surveillance video of the last half hour. In the picture, Lily walked out of the school gate with her school bag on her back, and a familiar blue patrol car slowly approached. The car window rolled down. She hesitated for a moment, then opened the door and got in. License plate number, I said with a hoarse voice. It's been blocked. The security guard shook his head. I breathed a sigh of relief, but felt even more uneasy. If the other party really wanted to hurt Lily, he would not have taken her away so blatantly. Unless he's telling me something, Erica whispered in my ear. He knows you'll panic when you see this photo, so he deliberately makes you feel at ease. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. On the way back, I applied for a visitation order. 2 hours later, I was standing outside the bars of the prison visiting room, sitting opposite Mark Reed. He looked much older than he had yesterday, and the wrinkles around his eyes looked as deep as if they had been carved. "You're here at last," he said. "Who is it?" I asked bluntly. Instead of answering, he took out a crumpled little piece of paper and gently pushed it to the other end of the table. "Coordinates," he said. "Go there and you will find the real answer." I stared at him, trying to read something in those cloudy eyes. "About your daughter, you really don't know?" I asked. He gave a wry smile. "Do you think I would let anyone touch her?" "No, Claire. You're not the target, you're the bait." My heart was shocked. Bait? They want to throw you off balance so everyone forgets about Amy. I took the note and my palms were slightly sweaty.
You mean there's someone behind all this?
He didn't say anything else, just looked at me quietly, as if he had completed his mission. It was still raining when we left the prison. I stood at the door, looking at the grey sky in the distance, and for the first time I had a strong premonition. This game is far from over, and I am stepping into its true core. Step by step, I stood in the dark, with the sound of dripping water, and Erica's rapid breathing in my ears. We just unearthed enough secrets in that underground archive to overturn half the police department. Original law enforcement recordings of the Audubon Park manslaughter case, 5 years ago, internal meeting records, and even a backup of the phone calls between the then chief and the deputy mayor. The evidence was like a sharp knife, tearing into pieces the mask that the entire city had been disguised for many years. Erica's flashlight was still on, illuminating the walls of filing cabinets and papers scattered on the floor. She had already copied some of the data into a USB flash drive, and was preparing to pack up and leave. "We have to leave quickly," she whispered. "It's too dangerous here." At this moment, the light above suddenly flashed, and then the entire space fell into complete darkness. My heart suddenly tightened. "You shouldn't be here." The voice came from the corner, deep and familiar. "Roy." Erica's flashlight lit up again, and the beam slowly swept across the front, finally stopping on the familiar figure. He was wearing casual clothes, holding a black pistol in his hand, and his eyes were so cold that they didn't look like a human. There was no trace of former loyalty and respect in those eyes, only calmness and determination. "Roy," I began, my throat aching with dryness. "Who are you?" He sneered and did not answer. Instead, he raised his phone and pressed the play button. A video starts playing. The picture shows Deputy Director Green 5 years ago, speaking to a group of men in uniform. "We must protect this system, even if it costs one person." His tone was calm and firm. "If someone must die, let her die accidentally." I stared at the screen, my fists clenched until my knuckles turned white. "You know," Roy said softly, "my sister was hit by a police car that lost control. Her name was Ana Fernandez." I was stunned. Ana Fernandez. Turns out that was her sister's name. "You think Mark is crazy?" he continued, a hint of sarcasm in his voice. "No, none of us are crazy. We just want the city to remember what it owes us." Erica's hand quietly reached for the pistol at her waist, but Roy immediately noticed the movement and raised the muzzle of the gun slightly. "Don't move." She froze. "Do you think Mark is the only one who is crazy?" he continued. "No, we have been waiting for this day, waiting for an opportunity for everyone to see the truth." I took a deep breath and forced myself to calm down. "You've been acting." I spoke slowly, my voice so low that it was almost squeezed out from between my teeth. "Since the day you were assigned to protect Lily." He sneered. "To be continued." "You've been acting since the day you were assigned to protect Lily." I slowly raised my hands, palms facing outward, and tried to make my voice sound steady. But I knew that the anger had already burned to my throat and was almost overflowing from my eyes. Roy sneered and pointed the gun steadily at my chest. "It's not acting, Claire." His tone was calm. "It's duty." His fingers were steady, just like a well-trained SWAT police officer. But what I care more about is what's in his eyes, that kind of indifference, determination, and even a little bit of compassion. "You think Mark is the only one seeking revenge?" he continued. "No, we are just making sure order doesn't break down." Erica stood nearby, one hand hidden behind her back, quietly sliding her phone into her pocket. Her movements were subtle, but they didn't escape my peripheral vision. "Who are you?" she asked in a low voice, with suppressed shock in her voice. "An organization? Or an entire system?" Roy was silent for a few seconds, as if he was considering whether to speak. Finally he spoke. "We are the gatekeepers. A group of people who are willing to sacrifice everything for the honor of the police." He spoke so naturally, as if this was not a secret group that secretly controlled life and death, but a loyal and fearless army. "So you were there that night 5 years ago?" I took a step forward while he was talking. He nodded, his voice low. "I was ordered to seal off the scene and deal with the evidence. That girl, she shouldn't die, but she must be the price." I clenched my teeth and my fists ached. The images of that night surged through my mind. Police lights flashing, gunshots echoing, and an innocent girl lying on the grass in the park, her white dress stained red with blood. They covered up the truth and wove an impenetrable web of lies, and Roy was one of the executors of this web. "What about your sister's death?" I asked tentatively. "Is that also a so-called price?" His eyes froze, and his finger tightened slightly on the trigger. But he didn't pull the trigger in the end. "She was an accident," he said. "But if you knew how the city council suppressed the report after her death, you wouldn't be asking me this question." I looked at him and suddenly understood something. He is not crazy. He is numb to the pain and then chooses to obey. "You betrayed not only the law," I said slowly, "but also your own conscience." "Conscience can't save this city," he said coldly. The air was filled with the smell of gunpowder and damp mold, as if a fatal conflict would break out at any second. Just then, Erica suddenly moved. She dove towards a pile of cardboard boxes nearby, yelling, "Run!" Almost instinctively, I dodged and hid behind a filing cabinet as a gunshot rang out next to my ears. The bullet hit the metal with a sharp bang. In the darkness, Roy's footsteps began to move, and he obviously didn't expect us to resist. Erica quickly rolled to the other side, trying to create some distance, I was breathing heavily, leaning against the cold metal cabinet, my brain working rapidly. Do you think you can leave here alive? Roy's voice came from the depths of darkness. You haven't even figured out whose side you are on. We are on the side of justice. I shot back through gritted teeth. Justice, he laughed. What you call justice is nothing but an illusion under the rules set by others. I was about to say something when I heard footsteps and a faint light in the distance. Someone is coming. Roy immediately became alert and quickly turned his head to look towards the door. Then, without hesitation, he raised his gun and shot the last light above his head, shattering it. Darkness swallowed up the space again. In the chaos, I could feel Erica moving towards me, while Roy quickly retreated in the other direction. I didn't know who was coming, but I had a vague feeling that this might be our only chance. Time won't wait for us, and now I know this more than ever. Almost instinctively, I rushed to the old distribution box in the corner. There was a layer of dust on the generator button, and next to it were a few faded English signs that read emergency power supply. In the darkness, my fingers wandered over the metal panel, my heart beating so fast that it felt like it was going to jump out of my throat. The footsteps were getting closer, and the sound of Angela's signature high heels hitting the floor could be heard from outside the door. Claire, her voice came through the crack in the door. Are you okay? I didn't answer, but slammed the start button. Buzz. An emergency light came on first, followed by the main lighting system on the ceiling, and the entire room was suddenly illuminated by white light. Roy was standing behind Erica, one hand around her neck, and the muzzle of the gun against her temple. He obviously didn't expect the lights to suddenly come back on, and he was stunned for a second. That second was enough for Erica to break free. She suddenly lowered her head, dropped her shoulders, and stepped on the back of his foot. The moment Roy let go of her hand in pain, she quickly fell forward and escaped from his control. Roy immediately raised his gun again, his eyes fierce, and was about to aim. A gunshot ripped the air. A flower of blood suddenly exploded from his left leg, and he staggered to the ground, curling up in pain. It was Angela who fired the shot. She had already rushed in with 3 plainclothes agents, their guns still smoking and their expressions as cold as ice. Are you crazy? She looked coldly at Roy, who was lying on the ground groaning. You are courting death by attacking police officers and holding federal investigators hostage. Roy gritted his teeth to endure the pain, but his eyes were still fixed on me. Do you think you won? I didn't respond, but just squatted down and looked at him. Now it's your turn to tell the truth, I said. There was a hint of sneer on his lips, as if he was mocking our naivety. The gatekeepers will not stop, he whispered. They are more powerful than you think. We put him in the car. The lighting in the interrogation room was very dazzling, forming a sharp contrast with the dim archive room just now. Roy sat on a chair with his legs cuffed and his left leg still bleeding, but there was no trace of pain on his face. I walked in and put a glass of warm water on the table. He looked up at me with cold eyes, as if I was no longer in his world. I sat down and asked quietly, "Tell me, how many gatekeepers are there?" He was silent for a few seconds, then shook his head slightly. You know. The light bulb in the interrogation room buzzed like a dying bee. Roy sat on the iron chair. The blood on his leg had coagulated into a dark brown scar. He didn't say a word, but the condescending indifference in his eyes made me feel extremely uneasy. I looked at him and whispered, "Tell me, how many gatekeepers are there?" The corners of his mouth slightly raised, as if he heard a childish question. "You know," he said, "this isn't just one person's problem." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He finally looked me in the eye. "Do you think Mark is manipulating everything?" "No, he is just a pawn. The gatekeeper has never been a person, but a mechanism. It is like a shadow department within the police station, responsible for handling those shady decisions. Like what happened at Audubon Park 5 years ago." Erica interjected. Roy was silent for a few seconds, then nodded slowly. "Yes, But there is more than just that one. I stared into his eyes, trying to dig out more truth from them. So tell me, how can we break this mechanism? He smiled softly, as if mocking our naivety. If you really want to track it down, check an internal list called Night Watchers. Erica and I looked at each other. We have never heard of this name. Roy closed his eyes and said nothing more. After leaving the interrogation room, I immediately contacted Lucas. He was working overtime in the technical department. When he heard the word Night Watch, he was stunned for a moment. What? You mean Night Watch? This name sounds familiar. Can I find it? I asked. The sound of him typing on the keyboard rang out. Give it a try. Erica, Lucas, and I worked all night in the technical department. It was not until 3:17 in the morning that Lucas suddenly stopped and turned to look at us with a pale face. Found it, he said. The encrypted folder on the screen clearly read, Night Watcher, read-only permission. After clicking in, a list appeared in front of us. I gasped. Deputy Chief Green's name was on the list. There's also the current chief, the assistant city attorney, and even David Cole. This is not corruption. This is systemic control. Lucas's fingers rested on the keyboard for a long time. If this list is true, Erica whispered, it means that half of the top brass in the entire police department are involved. Not half, I said. Probably all. Just as we were digesting all this, the doorbell rang. Standing outside the door was David Cole. He was wearing plain clothes and looked at me with a complicated expression. I know what you are investigating. I am no longer their man, but I can help you get the last piece of evidence. I hesitated for a moment and let him in. He pulled an old videotape from his coat pocket and placed it on the table. This was given to me by the former chief before he died, he said. He said that if the truth needs to come out one day, it should be handed over to the police officer who is least afraid of death. I picked up the videotape, and it felt so heavy that it seemed to be weighing down the past 5 years. Do you know what's in it? I asked. David nodded, his voice low. I know. It will tell you who really ordered Mark to take the blame. I stared at the videotape in my hand, my heart pounding. Erica had already walked towards the TV cabinet, ready to connect the old player. But I don't know whose face I'll see when the screen lights up. No one knows who is controlling this cat and mouse game behind the scenes. The quality of the videotape was very poor, as if it was hard-copied from a surveillance system. Erica turned up the volume, and we held our breath. The scene begins in a closed windowless conference room, with an LAPD badge on the wall. The shot is from a bird's-eye view, as if recorded from a camera on the ceiling. The timestamp from 5 years ago is clearly visible. Deputy Director James Green sat at the head of the conference table, wearing a neat uniform and looking stern. In front of him were several documents with the words Audubon Park Incident, Top Secret, clearly written on them. I clenched my fist so tightly that my nails almost dug into my palms. Green spoke up. We have to let Mark take the blame, otherwise the system will be shaken. He spoke slowly but firmly, as if he was not discussing a person's fate but just changing a screw. He has taken the initiative to take responsibility and is a qualified veteran. We can't ask him to say anything more. If necessary, he can be arranged to go to a health retreat. I heard my heartbeat getting louder and louder. Then, an unshown official whispered, regarding the follow-up action, shall we carry out the clearance procedure? Green nodded. If necessary, eliminate those who know about it. Erica gasped, and I turned to look at her. Her face was paler than the screen. The video continues to play, and the codename Night Watcher appears again. It turns out that it is not an organization, but an emergency mechanism within the police station, specifically designed to deal with uncontrollable scandals. Every major mistake will be filed as an N-number case, and the gatekeepers will be responsible for silencing, covering up, or even killing people to silence them. I finally understood that Mark was never the mastermind. He was a tool being used. The real mastermind behind the scenes sits behind the desk where we report our work every day. This thing, Erica's voice trembled. It's enough to put them all in jail. I was silent for a few seconds, then slowly shook my head. If we hand it over directly, they will destroy more things. Angela frowned. So what are you going to do? I stood up, walked to the window, and looked at the gloomy night outside. We need a live broadcast so that they don't have time to react. Lucas seemed to be prepared and nodded. I can hack into the city police department's internal network and play this video simultaneously on all terminals. He paused, his eyes becoming firm. This includes office computers, surveillance screens, and even every police officer's mobile terminal. As long as they turn on their devices, they can see it. I looked at Erica. She smiled softly and whispered, "The game has just begun." At that moment I knew we had embarked on a path of no return. At 3 o'clock in the morning, the rain in Los Angeles seemed to be flooding the city. I stood in the alley behind the police station, watching Lucas sitting in the passenger seat, typing away on his keyboard. The car windows were covered with a layer of mist. His fingers moved rapidly on the keyboard, and codes and path prompts kept scrolling on the screen. "Done," he whispered, his voice almost drowned out by the sound of the rain. The screen lights up with a countdown. The next second, a video popped up simultaneously on all police station terminals in the city. It's that video. At the closed-door meeting after the Audubon Park manslaughter case, 5 years ago, Deputy Chief Green's stern face and every word he uttered were like a time bomb, exploding on countless screens. The entire police station fell into chaos. In less than 10 minutes, the news became a hot topic. Night patrolmen exposed that senior police officers were involved in organized crime. Live broadcast countdown to kill and silence mechanism surfaced. Audubon incident tragedy was actually covered up by humans. At the TV station, Catherine Blair's voice came from the radio, calm and sharp. "Good evening, everyone. This is the special live broadcast of In-Depth Focus. We have just received an anonymous document involving an emergency mechanism called Night Patrol within the Los Angeles Police Department." I leaned against the car, and my phone vibrated. The caller ID was Erica. "Did you see it?" she said excitedly. "The whole city is going crazy. The mayor's office has held an emergency meeting, and Harris has personally ordered a thorough investigation." I said nothing, just nodded, even though she couldn't see it. 7 in the morning. City Hall. On TV, Green was sitting in a neat suit at a long table in a conference room, opposite Mayor Richard Harris. When the camera cuts in, he is trying to explain, "This video may be fake. We need technical identification." Harris sneered and waved his hand to signal his assistant to play the video. The same scene, the same dialogue, the same sentence. "If necessary, eliminate those who know about it." Green's face changed. Harris stared at him, his voice steady but oppressive. "You've made my entire city government an accomplice." No one spoke anymore. Green lowered his head, clenched his hands into fists, and dug his nails into his palms. He knew that he could no longer escape. 9 o'clock in the morning, in front of the police station, a large number of reporters swarmed in with cameras, and flashlights hit the floor tiles at the door like a rainstorm. I stood on the steps, looking at all this, my heart as calm as water. Behind him were Lucas and Erica. They didn't speak. The phone rings. It's a message from Lily. "Mom, you did it." I smiled softly, my eyes a little moist. It turns out that justice is not a single victory, but the accumulation of countless people who insist on telling the truth. But I know it's far from over. A few days later, the city council passed an emergency bill to establish an independent oversight committee to investigate cases related to the Night Watch. Mark's trial went on as scheduled, but in court he produced a recording, a secret conversation that has never been made public. That was a conversation between an identified official and Green in a secret room 5 years ago. There is a word mentioned in it, the Gatekeeper Project. No one knew what the word meant. Just know that this is not the end. I stood on a bench in Audubon Park, clutching the yellowed photo in my hands. The rain has stopped, and the sunlight shines through the clouds onto the grass, like the long-lost tenderness of this city. There were children running in the distance, and their clear laughter reminded me of Lily's childhood. The photo shows two little girls, one with a ponytail and a bright smile. The other one is shyly hiding behind her with only half of her face showing. Those were Amy and Lily, playmates who went to and from school together 5 years ago. Now one of them remains forever on the edge of the grass, and the other almost became the next name on the countdown. I gently placed the photo in front of the plaque. "You will be remembered," I said. Several students behind him seemed to recognize the person in the photo and whispered Amy's name. They didn't take pictures, nor did they disturb. They just watched quietly, as if at this moment they finally got the long overdue justice. I didn't look back, just nodded and turned away. But I know this is not the end. At the trial a few days ago, Mark's words were like a time bomb, detonating the entire court. "I'm not innocent," he said in a low but firm voice, as he sat in the dock. "But I'm not the only one who's guilty either." Then he played the recording, a secret conversation that has never been made public, between Green and an unnamed official in a back room. One word was mentioned repeatedly: gatekeeper program. No one knew what this word meant, but everyone understood the subtext. The manslaughter that year was not an isolated case, but the product of a set of mechanisms. And this mechanism is much deeper and darker than we imagined. The judge adjourned the court session, but no one believed that this would be the end of it. Mark was sentenced, but every word he said made everyone realize that the real storm had just begun. After returning to the police station, Lucas told me that the original file of the recording came from an unknown source, and the traced IP address was disconnected 5 minutes after it was uploaded. It was like someone had been waiting for this moment. Erica said, "This is not the revenge of one person, but the counterattack of the entire system." I was silent for a long time, and finally asked, "How many people still know about the gatekeeper?" She didn't answer. Now, as I stand outside Audubon Park watching the light filter through the trees, one thing is clear to me. What we uncovered is just the tip of the iceberg, and the part that is truly hidden underwater. Perhaps even I dare not face it. The sound of sirens in the distance broke the brief silence. I took out my phone and saw a news feed refreshing. The Gatekeeper project is questioned as a conspiracy of greater power. City Council thoroughly investigates Night Watch and uncovers more secret files. I put my phone away and headed to the parking lot. There seemed to be a new smell in the wind, the tense feeling of an approaching storm, familiar yet strange, and I am ready. I was standing outside the City Council hall. The rain had just stopped, and the puddles on the ground reflected the flashing red and blue lights of the news truck. There was a commotion in the crowd, and Catherine Blair rushed towards me with a microphone in hand, and all the cameras were pointed at my face. After the Night Watch was exposed, Deputy Chief Green has been suspended. Who do you think should be held accountable next? I looked at her, my eyes calm, my voice low but clear. It's not about anyone, it's the entire system. She was stunned for a moment, but did not ask any further questions. She just quickly wrote down the sentence. Reporters began to whisper, and cameras flashed, and I knew that this short answer would soon become a hot search keyword. But I know better than anyone that this is not a heroic victory, but the beginning of a new round of competition. When I tried to enter the city hall, I was stopped outside for 20 minutes. Mayor Harris is holding a closed-door meeting with his chief of staff, the chair of the city's police commission, and several senior advisors who don't often appear in public. I waited at the end of the corridor for a long time, until a secretary whispered to me, "The meeting is over." I had no intention of going in, but I knew what they talked about. A few hours later, Angela found me. Claire. She was standing in the police station parking lot, holding a small recorder in her hand. I recorded the meeting. I was not surprised. I took the recorder and she lowered her voice and said, "The mayor wants to shift the blame to Green and Roy, who have already fallen from power." He said, "We need a scapegoat. The more the better." I held the recorder tightly, but I didn't feel relieved at all. "He's not afraid of the truth being revealed," I said. "He's afraid of only half of the truth being revealed." She nodded, her eyes complicated. "The real problem is far more than this." We were silent for a moment, and the rain started to fall again. Back in the office, I backed up the recording and sent a copy to Lucas. He stared at the computer screen for a long time, and suddenly said, "This is not a simple internal accountability exercise, but more like some kind of institutional self-protection mechanism." "You mean Project Gatekeeper?" I asked. "Yes." He looked up, his eyes showing uneasiness. "But I can't find any public information about it. Even the deepest dark web can't find the definition of this word." I was silent for a few seconds. Then I said, "That means it exists deeper." Erica was flipping through the latest investigation report and whispered, "Have you ever thought about the recording before Mark was arrested? Why was he able to get it? Who whispered those words in his ear? And who arranged everything behind the scenes?" I didn't answer, but she was right. The next morning, I received an anonymous email with a PDF file attached. The title had only 2 words, Gatekeeper. The content is all blank, with only a footer with a string of coordinates. I asked Lucas to analyze the location, and the result was unexpected. It was under an oak tree next to the former director's grave. I went alone. After digging up the soil, they found an old metal box. Inside was a tattered notebook and a yellowed photo. The person in the photo was David Cole. He was much younger, wearing a patrol uniform, standing at the entrance of Audubon Park. Behind him, the sign of the crime scene could be vaguely seen. Written on the back of the photo was a sentence. They asked me to forget what happened that day, but I remember every detail. That night I was looking through my notebook at home, page after page of secret files from 2017 to the present, involving several unsolved cases. The gatekeeper was mentioned many times, but there was never a clear explanation. The only certainty is that all cases in which this word was mentioned were ultimately classified as wrongful convictions or non-police conduct. I was just about to turn off the lights and rest when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole I saw David Cole standing outside the door with a complicated expression. "I have something to give you," he whispered. It was left by the former director before he died. He handed over a sealed envelope. I took it, my fingertips trembling slightly. I didn't know what was inside. I stood in the doorway and looked into David Cole's face. Raindrops dripped down the brim of his hat, making small splashes on the steps. He was thinner than I remembered, and his eyes no longer looked like the determined patrolman he used to be. Instead, they were like a piece of glass that had been repeatedly polished and was almost transparent. "Are you sure you want to do this?" I asked him. He nodded, and the corners of the envelope he handed over had turned slightly yellow, as if it had been held in his hand for a very long time. I took it, and without opening it, I just looked down at it for a few seconds. "The former director said that if you really want to take them down, use this," he whispered. "He said you're the last person willing to keep chasing them." I didn't answer, but I knew this was not just a memo, it was a ticking time bomb. That evening, I scanned and filed the documents and personally handed the originals to Lucas. "Help me analyze the handwriting and the source of the paper," I said. He nodded, but didn't ask the content. He knew he shouldn't ask. There is no need for us to say anything more. The next morning, I received a message from Erica. "The mayor will hold an emergency press conference at City Hall at 10 a.m. this morning." I checked the time on my phone. I grabbed my coat and headed straight for City Hall. Harris stood at the podium with the iconic white marble wall of Los Angeles City Hall behind him. He was wearing a well-tailored dark gray suit and had a typical politician-like compassion on his face. "We will never tolerate any illegal behavior," he said it powerfully, as if he was really speaking for justice. I stood in the last row of the crowd with a sneer on my face. I pressed the play button on my phone, and a recording began to be uploaded to multiple social platforms simultaneously. It was the voice version of the handwritten memo, which recorded in detail the details of the transaction between the mayor and senior police officers, including covering up the truth of the Audubon Park manslaughter case, manipulating public opinion, and how to control internal investigations through the gatekeeper program. Within a few seconds, the phones of reporters at the scene vibrated, one after another. Someone exclaimed, "What is this?" Harris's expression froze and he tried to continue speaking, but was interrupted by the swarm of cameras. I turned and left without even a second glance. It was already dark when we returned to the police station. Erica and I were the only ones in the office. She was leaning against the table holding a cold cup of coffee. "You know what's going to happen next," she said. I nodded. "There will be a bigger storm. Not just to the mayor." She looked at me. "To you too." I was silent for a moment. Then I said, "I'm ready." She sighed softly and put the cup down. At this time, Lucas walked out of the technical room with a bad look on his face. "Claire, the city's Children's Rights Committee sent a formal notice." He paused. "Lily was summoned and asked to attend a hearing." My heart sank. "A hearing?" I frowned. Regarding her testimony on the Night Watch incident, he said, "They want to understand whether she made false statements while mentally unstable." I clenched my fists until my knuckles turned white. Erica whispered, "They're going to try to discredit you, starting with your daughter." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. The next second, I opened my eyes and said firmly, "Then we will let them know that some truths cannot be easily covered up by them." But what I didn't say was that the last line of the notice contained a familiar name. James Reynolds, the special prosecutor who was responsible for the aftermath of Amy's case. I checked the time on my phone. I grabbed my coat and headed straight for City Hall. Harris stood at the podium, with the iconic white marble wall of Los Angeles City Hall behind him. He was wearing a well-tailored dark gray suit, and had a typical politician-like compassion on his face. "We will never tolerate any illegal behavior," he said it powerfully, as if he was really speaking for justice. I stood in the last row of the crowd, with a sneer on my face. I pressed the play button on my phone, and a recording began to be uploaded to multiple social platforms simultaneously. It was the voice version of the handwritten memo, which recorded in detail the details of the transaction between the mayor and senior police officers, including covering up the truth of the Audubon Park manslaughter case, manipulating public opinion, and how to control internal investigations through the gatekeeper program. Within a few seconds, the phones of reporters at the scene vibrated one after another. Someone exclaimed, "What is this?" Harris's expression froze, and he tried to continue speaking, but was interrupted by the swarm of cameras. I turned and left without even a second glance. It was already dark when we returned to the police station. Erica and I were the only ones in the office. She was leaning against the table, holding a cold cup of coffee. "You know what's going to happen next," she said. I nodded. "There will be a bigger storm, not just to the mayor." She looked at me. "To you too." I was silent for a moment. Then I said, "I'm ready." She sighed softly and put the cup down. At this time, Lucas walked out of the technical room with a bad look on his face. "Claire, the city's Children's Rights Committee sent a formal notice." He paused. "Lily was summoned and asked to attend a hearing." My heart sank. "The hearing?" I frowned. "Regarding her testimony on Night Watch," he said. "They want to know if she was mentally unstable and made false statements." I clenched my fists until my knuckles turned white. Erica whispered, "They're going to try to discredit you, starting with your daughter." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. The next second I opened my eyes and said firmly, "Then we will let them know that some truths cannot be easily covered up by them." But what I didn't say was that the last line of the notice contained a familiar name. James Reynolds, the special prosecutor who was responsible for the aftermath of Amy's case. The hearing was held in the City Hall's third conference room, where a faded state seal hung on the wall and the air smelled of cheap coffee and printer paper. Lily sat at the side of the long table, wearing the light blue shirt I picked for her, with a notebook open on her lap, densely drawn with lines and keywords. The moment she saw James walk in, there was no sign of retreat in her eyes. "Little girl, do you know what you're saying?" James sat down and gave a hypocritical smile. "A lot more than you think." Lily's voice was not loud, but every word pierced the room like a nail. I sat next to her, my hands on her shoulders, feeling the tension in her body. Erica was also present as a psychological support counselor, and she pushed over a document with a psychological map that Lily had drawn herself. "This is not a child's fantasy," Erica said calmly. "This is her memory of what she saw with her own eyes. Every detail of that night 5 years ago was marked on the map in red. The angle of the light, the direction of the wind, even the sound of a car's tires rolling over broken glass. Every clue points to the same conclusion. Amy is not a fugitive, but a victim." James glanced down, his expression unchanged, but he was clearly suppressing his emotions. "How did you get this evidence?" he asked Lily. "I didn't get them," she responded dryly. "I remembered them." There was silence in the meeting room. Just then my phone vibrated. It was an encrypted message from Lucas. I clicked it, and my pupils contracted slightly. I found a video in the old surveillance footage of Reynolds entering the archives room of the Welfare Bureau late at night 5 years ago, and taking away a key document related to Amy's identity. He is not protecting the child. He is covering up the truth. I raised my head and looked at the man opposite me. He was flipping through the documents nonchalantly, as if nothing had ever happened. "And I know this is just the beginning." Lily's hand quietly held mine, and she whispered, "Don't be afraid, Mom." I didn't say anything. I just held her hand tightly. It started to rain outside the window. I sat in the corner of the hearing room and looked into Lily's eyes. That wasn't the look a 14-year-old girl should have. Too heavy, too bright, too sharp. Reynolds' expression changed twice. Once when he saw Lily's mental map, and once when I received Lucas's message. But before he could open his mouth, the doors pushed open. Maria Gomez walked in. She was wearing a plain gray windbreaker and holding a neatly folded piece of letter paper in her hand, her knuckles turning white from the strain. "Please allow me to speak." Her voice was not loud, but it made the entire conference room quiet instantly. Erica quickly stood up and signaled the staff to arrange a seat for her. "This is an anonymous report." Maria handed the letter to the chairman's desk. "But the content is true. I have verified it 3 times. She took a deep breath and fixed her eyes on Reynolds. "The letter mentioned that you accepted bribes from senior police officers at least 6 times in the past 5 years to help modify the identity information of the victims' families in order to cover up improper law enforcement. This included Amy Reed, the victim of the Audubon Park manslaughter case." Reynolds' expression finally cracked. "This isn't the first time." Maria's voice trembled, but she didn't stop. "It won't be the last. But this time, we will not be silent." The whole audience was in an uproar. Reporters were recording frantically, with shutter clicks, audible one after another. I subconsciously looked at Lily. She was not surprised, but just nodded slightly. At that moment I suddenly realized that she had known something for a long time. The hearing was quickly called off, and Reynolds was asked to cooperate with the investigation. When we left, it was already dark, and the rain was still falling. Lily walked in front carrying her school bag, and the sound of her crutches hitting the ground was crisp and firm. She suddenly stopped and turned to face me. "I'm not here for you, Mom," she said. "I'm here for the forgotten girl." I didn't speak. I wanted to say you are still a child, but when the words came to my lips I choked up. She smiled, just like that summer 5 years ago, with the sun shining on her face, when she could still run and jump up to hug me. Now she can't run, but she can stand steadier than I can. Late at night, I returned to the police station. The office was silent. I turned on my computer, and the moment the screen lit up, a new email was quietly lying in my inbox. The sender is unknown, and the title has only one sentence. The game is over. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Then I pressed the enter key. Late at night, I sat alone at my desk. The faint light from the computer screen was reflected on the glass window, overlapping with the scattered street lights outside the window. The rain is still falling, hitting the window drop by drop, like some kind of countdown. The email lay quietly on the screen. The game is over. There was no text after the title, and the attachment was a photo, an empty interrogation room, with an electronic clock hanging on the wall. The time frozen at 0000. My heart trembled, as if I heard the sound of some ending, but it was more like a provocation. I clicked on the attachment and enlarged the image details. The clock on the wall is the standard model for the police station, and the number can be clearly seen. I have walked past this interrogation room countless times. It is located on the basement floor, and now it is empty, except for the clock, which seems to have been specially arranged as a symbol. I pressed the call button. Lucas, come to my office. 10 minutes later, he came with darker circles under his eyes and a laptop in his hand. He sat next to me and pulled up the email metadata. The sender's IP address is blank, he said in a low voice. The sending path passes through at least 7 layers of proxies, and each layer uses dynamic encryption. This is not an ordinary hacker behavior. You mean this is man-made? He nodded, fingers tapping rapidly on the keyboard. More like a ghost email. Technically it doesn't exist. Then it's not a matter of technique, I said. It's a matter of ritual. Lucas looked up at me, a hint of surprise flashing in his eyes. How did you know? Because Mark has been playing this game all along. I stared at the screen. He doesn't want us to find him. He wants us to understand something. I reopened the case file, and all the photos, information, countdown screenshots flashed by one. The victims, their eyes, movements, positions, and even the angles from which they were filmed, all had an eerie consistency. Not just a record of death, but more like some kind of performance. He's telling us a story. Erica's voice came from the door. She came in with a stack of documents, her face pale but extremely determined. The list of gatekeepers has been compiled. She placed the document on my desk. It's 27 in total, 8 of whom have resigned or died. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. I opened the first page, and the names were so familiar that they made me nervous. Reynolds was on the list, as was Mayor Richard Harris, who was not directly involved in the Audubon case, but had participated in covering up the subsequent investigation. Do you want to keep going? She asked. I was silent for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. Where's your daughter? Her tone softened. Are you still going to let her get involved? I looked out the window. The rain was getting heavier. The streetlights in the distance were distorted into blurry spots of light in the mist. She came in a long time ago, I said, but I just didn't want to admit it. The next morning, I stood outside the hearing hall and watched the media swarm in. Lily didn't come. She said last night that she wanted to go out and relax with her friends, but I knew she didn't want to face the camera again. Reynolds has been suspended pending investigation. Claire. Lucas came over and handed me a printout. This is the analysis report of the last countdown email. I found a clue. What is it? The time displayed on that electronic clock is very strange. It is written in an old system format, and this version has only been used once within our police station. Which time? 5 years ago, the night of the Audubon Park manslaughter incident. This was the system used by the body cameras at the scene. My breath hitched. That is to say, I almost didn't dare to say that conclusion. That photo was taken on the night of the crime. No. Lucas shook his head. It was 3:17 this morning. The air froze instantly. I stood up suddenly and rushed out of the building. The rain hit my face, freezing cold. He's alive, I whispered. Mark's not dead. Erica followed me out, and she looked at me, with fear in her eyes for the first time. "Claire, you have to be careful. He's not playing games anymore. He's never playing games." I turned and headed toward the parking lot. "He's waiting for us." Hours later, Mayor Richard Harris announced the creation of an independent oversight board at a news conference and pledged to cleanse the police department from the inside. But what he didn't know was that among the crowd below the stage, there was a pair of eyes staring at him coldly, and the real countdown may have just begun. Mayor Harris stood at the podium, the spotlight making him squint. He cleared his throat and announced in the calm tone of a politician, "We have established an independent oversight committee to thoroughly investigate corruption within the police department." There was thunderous applause at the scene, and reporters were recording frantically, as if a big drama had finally reached its climax. Catherine Blair did not join in the applause. She held the microphone in her hand and walked quickly to the front of the stage. "Mr. Mayor, are you willing to accept the committee investigation? After all, your name appears on the list of gatekeepers." The crowd fell silent. Harris's smile didn't waver at all. He smiled gently and said, "I welcome any form of investigation as long as it is fair and transparent." After he finished speaking, he turned and left. But just as the camera was looking elsewhere, his secretary quietly slipped into the office from the back door, holding a document tightly in his hand. It was an internal report from 5 years ago, the original account of the Audubon Park manslaughter case. A few minutes later, black smoke rose from the incinerator. I know all this because Lucas installed a little ear at City Hall. As I walked into Audubon Park, the last trace of rain finally dissipated from the sky. There were several bouquets of new flowers placed in front of the memorial plaque, and the petals trembled slightly in the wind. I whispered, "Amy, we will remember you." There were footsteps behind me. I remember her too. David Cole came over, his hands in his pockets, with a complicated expression. "I was the one who fired the gun. I live with regret every day." I didn't speak. He continued, "Maybe we can do something together." I looked up into the distance. The sunlight shines through the clouds, like belated forgiveness and like new hope. But I know that the real reckoning has just begun. Back at the office, I was exhausted. I sat in my chair, staring at the pile of reports on my desk, still thinking about David's words. Suddenly I found something new on my desk, an unsigned manila envelope, lying there quietly, as if waiting for me for a long time. I opened it slowly. Inside was a photo. That's me standing in front of the Audubon Park Memorial last night. I stared at the photo, my fingertips trembling slightly. The memorial plaque in Audubon Park blurred into an outline in the night, and I stood there with a solemn expression, as if paying my final respects to a name that should not be forgotten. But the existence of this photo is like a silent mockery. It tells me that all this is far from over. There was a line of words on the back of the photo, written neatly in black pen. "Do you think everything is over?" I took a deep breath, turned the photo over, and handed it to Lucas, who had just walked into the office. "Fingerprint scan," I said. He took the photo and frowned. "Who sent this?" "No one signed it." He didn't ask any more questions, just nodded and turned to go to the technical room. I knew he would find something, or at least something close to the truth. A few hours later, Lucas knocked on my office door with a blown-up scan in his hand. "You're not going to believe this," he said, his voice cracking. I cast my eyes toward the screen. At the edge of the photo, there is an almost invisible fingerprint, which is finally clearly visible after enhancement. "We checked the database," Lucas continued, "and it's not Mark's. It's not Roy's or Green's. It's Jason Miller's." I was stunned. "Jason Miller." I repeated the name, as if trying to recall something from my memory. Lucas nodded. "The old archivist who died in a car accident 5 years ago." I stood up and walked over to the whiteboard covered with the membership list and timeline of the gatekeepers. Jason Miller's name had long been crossed out and marked dead. "Do you remember how he died?" It was a one-way accident on the highway, Lucas said. The police determined that the driver was fatigued. The vehicle ran over the guardrail and fell off the cliff. The body was burned beyond recognition. But now you tell me he appeared on the surveillance footage at City Hall. Yes, the night before you found the photograph. I was silent for a few seconds. Then I picked up the phone and called Erica. She answered quickly. I need you to check someone's background information as soon as possible. 10 minutes later, Erica pushed the door open with a stack of printed documents in her hands. Jason Miller, she flipped through the files, was the head of the police department's internal records room, responsible for managing electronic and paper records of confidential cases. He was transferred from his position 3 years ago due to mental health issues. She looked up at me, but his real background is that he was an early member of the Night Watch. Night Watch? Lucas frowned. It's a small-scale civilian monitoring organization that specializes in collecting evidence of corruption within the police, Erica explained. They were active 10 years ago but were later dismantled due to information leaks. Some members were prosecuted and sentenced, while others disappeared. She closed the file and said in a low voice, "If he is still alive, it means that the gatekeeper has not completely collapsed. And he may know more things that we haven't found yet." I looked at the photos on the table and felt a chill in my heart. This cat and mouse game never really ends. Maybe it just changes players. Just then there was a knock on the door. I looked up and saw David Cole standing in the doorway with a complicated look on his face. "Can I come in?" he asked. I didn't say anything, just nodded. He walked in, holding an old-looking notebook in his hand. "Claire," he whispered, "Jason didn't die in an accident." I looked at him. "He caused the car accident himself," he continued. "He left evidence of his fake death, and then disappeared completely." He put the notebook on the table. "I secretly found this from the ruins of his house," he said. "Maybe it contains the answer you want to know." I didn't open it immediately. I just looked at that worn-out notebook and understood one thing. This isn't just a countdown to the Avengers. This is a deeper reckoning that has only just begun. I stared at the worn notebook, my fingertips going numb. David Cole stood by the table, his eyes filled with uneasiness and guilt. He whispered, "Jason didn't die in an accident. He caused the accident himself, left evidence of his fake death, and disappeared." He said to me before he left, "When the countdown reaches 0, the real trial will just begin." The air in the room seemed to freeze for a moment. Erica gently closed the information in her hand, frowning. "If he is still alive and knows the inside story of the gatekeeper, then he is very likely the real mastermind behind all this." "No," I spoke slowly, my tone calm but suppressed. "Mark is the murderer, but Jason may be the real referee of this game." Lucas looked at the fingerprint scan on the screen and said softly, "He can fake his death and bypass all our tracking systems. If he is still alive, it means his plan has never been interrupted." I picked up my notebook and opened to the first page. The yellowed paper was densely covered with time, place, names of people, and some symbols that I couldn't understand. But on one page it was written,
Los Angeles Police Department, 8976 body camera, last used in City Hall B2 archives.
I looked up suddenly. "Lucas, pull up the police equipment registration database immediately." He nodded, his fingers tapping quickly on the keyboard. A few seconds later, a record popped up on the screen. Los Angeles Police Department, 8976. Numbered lost device. Last recorded activity was at 02:43 a.m. on the day of the Audubon Park incident. 5 years ago, GPS signal eventually lost in the B2 area of City Hall. My heart was shocked. That law enforcement recorder was the photo-taking device we found in the homes of multiple victims. It not only belonged to the police, but also directly pointed to the problem of core information leakage within the police station. "Seal off the archive area on the B2 floor of City Hall immediately." I stood up and grabbed my coat. "I will lead the team in myself." Erica glanced at me.
Are you sure?
There might be something more dangerous hiding in there than we thought. I've wasted too much time, I said coldly. Now it's time to make him understand that I won't be led around by the nose anymore. Before leaving, I called my daughter. She asked softly, "Mom, will you come back to watch a movie with me?" I paused and replied in a low voice, "Definitely." After hanging up the phone, I put on my tactical gloves and walked out of the office. It was raining outside and the wind was blowing a bit hard. Ethan was already waiting for me at the door of the archives, holding a long dusty registration book in his hand. He handed it to me and pointed to a certain page. When I found this notebook, it had Jason's handwriting on it. He said, "There is a truth hidden here that does not belong to this world." I took the register and turned to the last page. Just one sentence. "Cabinet X07, don't let it sleep any longer." I frowned and looked towards the dark and deep B2 passage ahead. "Claire Hawke, are you ready?" It was a reckoning that turned everything upside down. I raised my hand and gestured, and the team members entered one by one. The lights were dim, and the air smelled of old paper and damp. We walked through rows of dusty lockers, our footsteps echoing down the hallway, until I stopped in front of a cabinet marked X. My heartbeat starts to speed up. The moment I reached out and opened the drawer, there was only one thought in my mind. Who is the one who truly controls this countdown? I stood in front of cabinet X07 with my palms full of sweat. The moment my fingers gently opened the drawer, a stale, musty smell hit me in the face. The cabinet is not big, but it contains several videotapes and an old portable VCR neatly stacked inside. I subconsciously held my breath and my heart beat so fast that it seemed like it was going to jump out of my chest. "Found it," I whispered. Lucas immediately squatted down and carefully took the VCR. "This machine is a very old model, but it looks like it can still be used." Erica frowned as she looked at the tapes. There are no labels or numbers. It's like they were deliberately hidden, then watched them one by one. I stared at the pile of tapes with a firm tone. It was already 1 o'clock in the morning when we returned to the temporary command center. It took Lucas a full 2 hours to successfully convert the first tape into digital format. The picture started out as blurry snowflakes, then slowly became clear. A familiar face appeared on the screen. Mayor Harris sat at the head of the conference table. Next to him were the city police chief, the child rights commissioner, and 2 senior government officials I didn't know. "We must control the direction of public opinion," Harris said in a deep voice. "The manslaughter case in Audubon Park cannot escalate. Otherwise it will not only affect my re-election, but also shake the entire system." Another person nodded. "I have already informed the media, and the social work department will also cooperate to modify the testimony. As for the police department, a silence agreement has been reached, and no one is allowed to disclose the details." "Very good." Harris smiled with satisfaction. "Remember, this is not about covering up the truth, but for a greater order." I froze in place as if I had been electrocuted. Erica whispered, "This is not corruption. This is systemic crime." The room fell into deathly silence. Lucas's fingers were still on the keyboard, his face pale. That is to say, they knew the truth from the beginning to the end, and they allowed it to continue. I clenched my fist so tightly that my nails almost dug into my palms. That mistaken shooting 5 years ago cost 5 innocent lives, but what was met with cover-up and indifference from those in power. "This isn't revenge," I whispered through gritted teeth. "This is reckoning." There was a sudden knock on the door. I stood up suddenly, my hand unconsciously reaching for the gun at my waist. "It's me." A familiar voice came from outside the door. James Reynolds walked in. He was wearing a suit and looked at us with a complicated expression. "I know what you found," he said slowly, "but I can tell you something even more terrifying. These videos are just the tip of the iceberg." I stared at him. "What do you mean?" "The other tape contains the real key evidence." He paused. It's not about Amy's death, but about her identity. The air seemed to freeze. Who? Erica asked. James didn't answer, just looked at me. Would you like to hear me out? I didn't say anything, just nodded. He walked to the table and picked up the remaining videotapes. There is one more, hidden deep in the archives of City Hall. Only that tape can explain why Mark chose this method, and why his target was never the police, but the entire system. I clenched my fists and said in a cold voice, "Tell me the location." James looked at me, his eyes showing an unprecedented seriousness. "You will regret it." "I never do anything I regret." I stared back at him. "Unless it doesn't prevent more people from dying." He sighed and turned towards the door. "Follow me."
I glanced at Erica and Lucas, who quickly gathered their equipment and followed.
It was still raining outside, and the wind was getting stronger. We once again stepped into the dark and damp archive room on the B2 floor. There was an oppressive atmosphere in the air, and the sound of footsteps echoed in the empty corridor. This time, our target is no longer cabinet X07, but a hidden corner deeper inside. There is a metal cabinet that no one knows about, with a strange label on it. Gatekeeper files, high-level access only. I walked forward and pushed the door open. In the darkness, only a slight clicking sound was heard. The lights come on automatically, and in the very center, there lay a videotape labeled X. At this moment, in the rain outside the city hall, a black car stopped quietly. The car door opened, and a woman in a business suit got out holding an umbrella. She is Catherine Blair, the ace host of local TV. She looked down at the anonymous message she had just received on her phone. Claire Hawke is on the B2 floor of City Hall. She has evidence that could overturn everything. She looked up at the heavy door, the corners of her mouth slightly raised. Then she walked into the rain, but she didn't go in directly. Instead, she stopped at the door and waited quietly, waiting for Claire to come out. Because her intuition told her that after this night, Los Angeles would no longer be the same Los Angeles. I stared at the X12 videotape and my palms felt slightly cold. Lucas had already set up the equipment, and Erica stood behind him, looking tense. James Reynolds retreated into a corner, as if afraid to be caught up in the storm. "Ready?" Lucas whispered. I nodded. The picture jumped, and then a man's face appeared on the screen. It's Jason Miller. The investigator in charge of Amy's case 5 years ago was also the only one who raised objections at the time. He left a meaningful sentence in his closing report. "This is not a mistake. This is a choice." But no one heard his voice again. At this moment, his face appeared before us. His tone was so calm that it was almost cruel. "If you see this video, it means I can no longer protect it." There was dead silence in the room. The gatekeepers have never really disappeared. They just changed their names. You think you are facing one person, but in fact you are facing the entire system. Every silent person is its accomplice. He paused and looked directly into the camera. "Remember, justice doesn't come automatically." The picture freezes on a line of words he wrote. "Audubon Park is not the end." The screen went black. "Gatekeeper," Erica murmured. "This organization, does it really exist?" Lucas's face turned even paler than before. If Mark is one of the gatekeepers, then he's not just seeking revenge for his daughter. He's trying to overthrow the system. I took a deep breath, my throat dry. He chose the wrong approach, but I also understood one thing. From that moment on, what we were facing would no longer be a murderer, but a reckoning that had long been buried deep in power. There was a knock on the door. We all looked towards the door alertly. I walked over and opened the door. Catherine Blair stood there, her umbrella still dripping. She looked at me, her eyes revealing the calmness and ambition unique to professional women. "If you are willing to release this video, I can help you get it across the country." I looked into her eyes and knew that once I took this step, there would be no turning back. But I nodded anyway. "Good." After returning to the command center, I convened the task force members. David, Tom, Isabel. I replayed the tape, Everyone looked at the screen in silence. Until the last screen goes off, the room fell into silence. David spoke first, his voice low and hoarse. Silence agreement. Turns out it's still alive. The agreement of silence is not just a cover-up of one case. It is a self-protection mechanism for the entire system. David's voice echoed in the command center, like a needle piercing everyone's heart. He opened an old, yellowed internal memo. The corners of the paper were curled up, as if it had been read over and over again countless times. He ran his finger lightly across a paragraph in bold font. For any incident involving a crisis of public trust, dereliction of duty by police officers, or systemic errors, the silence agreement procedure should be initiated as a priority, with a designated person in charge, coordinating public relations, legal affairs, and higher-level units to unify their statements and ensure public opinion control and social order stability. I stared at the words, my throat tightening. Erica sat at the table, her hands crossed under her chin, her eyes revealing a mixture of anger and powerlessness. Lucas's fingers tapped rapidly on the keyboard, trying to trace the memo back to its earliest recorded source. This isn't the first time, I whispered. This is a complete process. David looked up at me, his eyes bloodshot. We all know what happened that night, but no one dares to speak out. Not because we are afraid of getting in trouble, but because we think silence is part of justice. The room fell silent again. The phone vibrated. It was a message from Catherine. The live broadcast is ready, just waiting for your nod. I took a deep breath and looked away from the screen. Let's get started. I pressed send. A few minutes later, the TV screen automatically jumped to the local news channel. Catherine Blair was standing in front of the camera, with the video footage we just watched behind her. Jason Miller's face appeared on the screen, his tone calm and cruel. If you see this video, it means I can no longer protect it. Her voice boomed through the speakers. Dear viewers, this is a special report from KCL Channel 9. Today we are revealing for the first time a long-standing secret, the Pact of Silence. For the next 10 minutes she played the video, and parts of the memo verbatim without adding any qualifiers. When the words "this is not a mistake, this is a choice" appeared, there was an uproar at the scene. Social media exploded instantly. Silent agreement quickly topped the hot search list. Some people questioned the police's ability to cover up the truth. Some began to look back at old cases, and more victims' families contacted Maria. Not long after, Angela came to the command center in person, holding a stack of documents in her hand. I have filed a formal application for an investigation with the state attorney general, she said. All cases that were once included in the silence agreement will be re-examined. I nodded, but my heart felt heavy as if a stone was pressing on it. Before she left, she looked at me and said, "Do you understand? This is not revenge, nor is it a reckoning. This is about returning the system to the way it should be." The moment the door closed, Maria walked in. She was followed by a group of people, an old man with a cane, a mother holding her child, and one or two plainclothes policemen. "They are willing to testify," Maria said softly. The Audubon Park manslaughter case is not an isolated incident. It is the tip of the iceberg. I looked at them, faces that were both familiar and unfamiliar. Some were eyewitnesses. Some said they had been forced to revise their reports while handling cases. And some were relatives of the Night Patrol, a secret group that was suppressed 5 years ago for exposing police irregularities. "We are not here for revenge," Maria repeated. "We want to let the children know that the world will not remain silent forever." My eyes scanned each one. There was no hatred in their eyes, only waiting for a response that is too late. There was a knock on the door. I opened the door, and it was Lucas, looking even paler than before, holding a screenshot of an email in his hand. "Just received it. From Jason," he said. Just one sentence. I took the phone. The screen lights up. "You have seen the truth. Now it is up to you to decide if it is worth telling." I looked out the window. The rain was still falling, and the street lights reflected the wet streets, like some kind of countdown shadow. Time won't wait for us. But this time, I think I took the first step. I stood in front of the window, my fingers unconsciously stroking the frame of the phone. The words drove into my mind like a nail. You have seen the truth. Now it is your turn to decide whether it is worth telling. I know this email is not a threat, but a torture. Lucas was still staring at the computer screen with a serious expression. Jason's IP is disconnected again, but this time he used our internal relay server. He whispered, "It's like someone is forwarding it for him." Erica sat aside, holding the yellowed copy of the memo in her hand. Her eyes no longer filled with anger, but sadness. This isn't just one person's secret, Claire. This is the secret of the entire system. If you let this out, not only will Mark be finished, but the entire police department will be shaken. I didn't speak. The sound of raindrops hitting the window was like some kind of countdown, reminding me of those photos and the unspeakable expressions on each victim's face. They didn't know they were going to die, but they seemed to have already sensed that their fate could not be changed. Lily's picture flashed in my mind. She said to me last night, "Mom, you're the one who remembers them." I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, then opened my phone's photo album and found the photo of the Audubon Park Memorial Wall from 5 years ago. In the corner of the photo there is a small stone tablet with a name engraved on it. Amy Reed. I finally understand that true silence is not that no one speaks out, but that when you tell the truth, no one is willing to believe it. At 2 o'clock the next morning, I drove to Audubon Park. The rain has not stopped completely yet, and water droplets from the leaves are dripping onto my shoulders. I stood in front of the memorial plaque, Lily's words echoing in my ears. "I'm not doing this for justice. I do this to remember them." I took out my phone, opened the encrypted cloud drive, and started uploading files, video footage, testimony, memos, case records, body camera footage, everything. It was pushed synchronously to 3 public databases. One copy was automatically sent to Catherine, another was sent to Angela, and a copy of the last one was kept hidden deep in the cloud. The moment I pressed the send button, I felt a calmer feeling than ever before. I don't know when the rain stopped, and a faint light appeared in the sky, as if the city had truly opened its eyes for the first time. When I got home, I took a hot shower, changed into clean clothes, and just sat down to have a cup of coffee when my phone vibrated. New email alert. From unknown. Title: None. The text only has one sentence. "You've made your choice, but the cost hasn't even begun to be calculated yet." I clicked on the attachment. It's a photo. The shooting time was 11:42 last night. The location is right outside my house. There is a sentence written on the back. "Are you sure she won't be the 7th? I stared at the photo on the phone screen, my palms feeling slightly cold. The rain outside the door had not dried yet, and Lily was still sleeping in the house. The murderer not only knew my address, but was able to approach it in the early hours of the morning, without being detected, which meant that he was either a professional, or was very familiar with our patterns of action. I called Lucas, and before he could even start talking I said, "Come to my house now." 20 minutes later, Lucas and Erica both arrived. As soon as Lucas walked in, he grabbed my phone and started checking the metadata of the photos. His brows furrowed more and more, and he finally whispered, "This string of code seems to be mocking us." "What do you mean?" I asked. The IP jumped 7 times, and the disguise was quite professional, but the source of the signal before the last jump seemed to come from inside the police station. He said, "To be more specific, it should be an old server segment in the archives room or the evidence department." My heart sank. Jason Black, the technician who helped cover up the Audubon Park case, died at home 3 months ago from a sudden heart attack.
Everyone thought that the ghost was over, but now it seems that there are still people who are continuing this nightmare.
Erica took the phone and read the sentence carefully. You are not the only one who remembers. She read it softly, her eyes becoming serious. This is not a threat. It is an invitation.
Invite?
I asked. He's looking for allies, she said, or testing your resolve to keep going. I was silent for a few seconds, then sent Ethan a message. Help me check all the records of entry and exit on the night of the Audubon Park incident, especially the B2 floor of City Hall. Ethan quickly replied, I'm already checking. Some things are deeper than you think. In less than an hour, he personally delivered a printed paper. Those were the access logs in the monitoring system, records that should have been archived and destroyed, but were left out of the backup disk due to a technical error. One of the records caught our attention. Name unknown. Pass number 01987. Cancel. Access time 2040. Departure time 20. Floor B2 archives area. This person went in and out 3 times using an expired pass, Ethan whispered, but each time he appeared, it was exactly when we were retrieving the original case files and modifying the chain of evidence. He's one of the keepers, I said. Ethan nodded. And he's a professional, like he's received intelligence training. Erica took out the list of Night Watch members, which was a suspect database we compiled privately, covering all people who were indirectly related to the case that year. There's a name here that has never been mentioned. She pointed to a line of words. Robert Haynes, former consultant to the City Supervisory Bureau, suddenly resigned 5 years ago and moved overseas. He was one of the architects of the Protocol of Silence, she explained. If anyone knows the true structure of Gatekeeper, it's probably him. I clutched the document tightly. 5 years ago, Mark personally signed the memorandum defining the Audubon Park manslaughter case as self-defense. But apparently he is not the only one pushing this. We need to find Robert, I said. He is no longer in the United States. Erica added, but perhaps someone has contacted him. One person comes to mind, David Cole. One of the police officers who was on duty at the time later resigned due to guilt and lived in seclusion in an old community in the suburbs. He had expressed his willingness to testify, but only on the condition that it must be ensured that innocent people would not be implicated. I decided to go find him. Before I left, Lucas reminded me, if you plan to investigate further, don't forget, you are not alone now. I didn't say anything, just nodded. Lily was still sleeping in the room, and soft breathing sounds could be heard from the room. I stood at the door and looked at her wheelchair leaning against the bed, like a quiet little animal. I'm not doing this for justice. I do this to remember them. It is also to prevent others from pretending to forget. I sat on the leather sofa in David's old living room, my fingers unconsciously stroking the notebook on my lap. The wind outside tapped gently on the glass windows like some secret code. Echo. His eyes were a little dazed when he pronounced the name. It was the last warning I heard before I resigned. David Cole was one of the police officers on the scene of the Audubon Park case, and the only one who tried to report it to his superiors but was quickly transferred from his post. He now lives in an old community on the edge of the city. His house is filled with old newspapers and clippings, and on the wall are several yellowed photos of a group of uniformed police officers, several of whom are dead. That night, someone contacted Robert through an encrypted channel, he said. Mark didn't know about it, or rather he didn't know who the other party was. Are you sure? I asked. I won't say anything that I'm not sure about. He paused and lowered his voice. But what I do know is that the man codenamed Echo is in control of the true structure of the entire Protocol of Silence. Robert is just one of the executors, and Echo is more like a gatekeeper among gatekeepers. My heart beat faster. Can you contact him? David smiled bitterly. If I could, I wouldn't be like this now. But I heard that he once made a remote transmission through an abandoned FBI relay station. I wrote this sentence down, and a new clue already came to my mind. Less than half an hour after I left David's house, Catherine Blair called me. Claire, I just received a tip that someone broke into the city archives late at night and was suspected of destroying a batch of documents about the silence agreement. Her voice was filled with excitement. I have arranged for a remote camera to monitor the scene. I immediately rushed to the command center, where Lucas was waiting for me. When the scene cut in, I almost held my breath. The man in black moved silently across the hall, his movements as skillful as if he had practiced them countless times. The angles he used to avoid surveillance cameras and the ways he used to bypass infrared sensors were all professional. He didn't turn on the lights and only relied on the night vision goggles he carried with him to move forward. The camera zoomed in, his face hidden under the hood and couldn't be seen clearly, but that step so familiar that it made my stomach twitch, just like the man who walked by the gate of Audubon Park 5 years ago. "This is no ordinary person," Erica whispered. "This is a signal," I said. "He's not here to destroy the evidence. He's trying to see if we found him." Lucas stared at the screen, his fingers already flying on the keyboard. He used triple jumps before entering the main server, and the IP disguise was extremely sophisticated, but the frequency he just connected to is a bit strange. "What frequency?" I asked. "The military frequency band cannot be accessed by civilian equipment." He frowned. "This means that he has some special permissions, or he is a member of a deeper organization." "You mean Echo?" Lucas said nothing, just nodded. I took a deep breath and clenched my fists. "Give the order." Erica looked at me. "We have to find Echo, or this will never end." I didn't answer, because I know that the real game has just begun. But behind this cat-and-mouse game, there is more than just the truth. I was standing in Andre Martin's apartment. Outside the window was the humid rain in Los Angeles late at night, and the air was filled with the smell of rust and mold. He leaned against a shabby sofa, fiddling with an old radio in his hands, with a sneer on his face that only appeared after experiencing too many secrets. "You're looking for Echo?" His voice was low and sarcastic. That was my former colleague. Lucas and I looked at each other, and neither of us said anything. Erica sat in the corner, tapping her fingers on the edge of her laptop, her eyes fixed on Andre's every move. 3 years ago, we were all in Project Grayscale. He pulled out a worn journal from a drawer, with a faint Pentagon logo printed on the cover, specializing in dealing with threats within the government. Not terrorists, not spies, but our own people. He turned the page and pointed to a code name, Echo. "This is not a name, but a functional description," he said. "He is the echo of the information. All deleted data can be reproduced as long as he is present. All encrypted communications can be decoded as long as he wants." I frowned. "You just said he was missing?" "No," Andre shook his head. "He was disappeared, just a week before the project was disbanded. He lost contact completely, and no one knew where he went. But I know one thing. Echo will not disappear out of thin air. It will only move." My heart was shocked. Lucas immediately turned on the equipment and called up the spectrum of the abnormal frequency we had just intercepted. "This is the frequency hopping technology used by Echo." Lucas's voice was filled with anxiety. "It's not civilian grade, nor is it an ordinary military encryption protocol. This is a dynamic frequency hopping system that changes channels every time it communicates, and the frequency span covers the entire UHF band. In other words, Andre took over the conversation. Unless you have special receiving equipment, you can't track him at all. And he's not just transmitting information. It's more like sending some kind of signal." "You mean provoking?" Erica asked. "It's not a provocation, it's a call." Andre stared at me. "You think he is avoiding you? Wrong. He is letting you find him, provided you are smart enough." I took a deep breath and tried to calm myself down. "So how do we find him?" I asked. Andre was silent for a few seconds, then slowly said, "If he is still alive, it means he is still on the mission." "What do you mean?" I demanded. "Project Grayscale has not been disbanded," he whispered. "It has just changed its name." It was 2 o'clock in the morning when we returned to the police station. "Erica, Lucas and I reviewed all the transfer records of senior personnel involved in the public safety field in the past 3 years. We compared every unusual promotion and every unpublished personnel report one by one. Erica suddenly stopped what she was doing and pointed at a paragraph of text on the screen. If there is an uncontrollable exposure risk, initiate gray zone transfer. She looked up at me. This is a secret order that appeared in the documents left behind by Night Watch. It probably means that Echo has been redeployed to another department or city. So, what we have to do is not only find out who Echo is, but also where he is now. I gritted my teeth. Just then, Ethan walked in, looking a little nervous. Claire, I just received a message from a social worker friend of mine. She said that her friend, who used to work for a private security company, recently died in an accident. She found an unsent letter at the deceased's home. I looked up at him and asked, what did the letter say? Ethan hesitated. She said the letter mentioned Echo. The air seemed to freeze. Contact her, I said. I want to meet this person. It has been arranged. Ethan nodded. But she will only give the letter to you in person. I checked the time. The real game has indeed just begun. I sat on a bench in the alley behind the police station, clutching the letter Maria had brought. The paper has turned yellow, and the handwriting is sloppy, revealing a sense of urgency and fear. They hid Echo in a new project, Phoenix Eye. Erica quickly searched the name on the computer, and after a few seconds her face changed. A federally funded covert surveillance system, she whispered. The goal is to infiltrate law enforcement agencies. Lucas immediately called up the data stream and tried to track the IP node of the Phoenix Eye project. His fingers tapped the keyboard quickly, and his brows furrowed further and further. This is not an ordinary encrypted network, he gritted his teeth. This is a military-grade distributed architecture, with server nodes distributed in multiple states. But the audio we intercepted may be a breakthrough. He pressed play. A vague but clearly identifiable voice came from the speakers. Countdown begins. 7. The voice was low, calm, and had an imperative rhythm. A chill went down my spine. This voice is so familiar. 5 years ago, after the Audubon Park manslaughter case, it was Deputy Chief Green who headed the investigation team. The first sentence he said when facing the media was in this rhythm and tone. I stood up suddenly, interrupting Lucas's analysis. It's none other than Green himself, I whispered. There was dead silence in the room. Erica closed her notebook with a complicated look in her eyes. In other words, the people who covered up the truth back then are now controlling everything in another way. And Echo is just one of their tools. Lucas nodded. If Phoenix Eye is really involved in internal police surveillance, then Mark is just one of the pawns. The real problem may be much deeper than we think. We have to find the core of this project, I said. Time is running out. Ethan interrupted. I found an anonymous tip-off that mentioned that one of Phoenix Eye's edge data centers is located in the suburbs of Los Angeles, at an abandoned warehouse of a communications company. Get ready for action. I stood up and grabbed my coat.
A few minutes later, Erica, Lucas, and I were in a police car heading to the suburbs.
The rain was still falling, and the world outside the car window was blurry, like some kind of disguise. Half an hour later, we arrived at the so-called data center. The iron gate was ajar, like an invitation. We entered cautiously, the air thick with the smell of dust and old electronics. Cables hung messily from the wall, and broken cabinet parts were scattered on the ground. This place has been cleared. Something's wrong. Erica frowned. They knew we were coming. Lucas squatted in front of a broken server, holding a half-destroyed hard drive in his hand, and said in a heavy tone, "Someone evacuated early, but did not take everything with him." He looked up at me. I nodded, but felt a little uneasy. Not a victory, but a trap. But I didn't say that, because I know that the real game has just begun. I clenched my fists and stared at the broken hard drive. Lucas's hands were shaking. He inserted it into the portable repair device. The screen flickered a few times, and finally a progress bar popped up, reading 7. Can this thing be salvaged? Erica squatted beside him. It can be saved, Lucas said in a low voice, as long as there is a piece of data that has not been wiped clean. The three of us huddled in front of the wreckage of the server, as if waiting for a miracle. The sound of rain seeped in from outside the iron gate, hitting the eaves and also hitting my nerves. 23%. Claire, Erica said suddenly, do you think Mark knew this? I shook my head. No, all he knows is revenge. And Green. He's building a cage. Phoenix Eyes. She repeated the code name in a low voice. Found it. Lucas looked up sharply. It's a classified document titled Internal Surveillance List. Erica and I immediately went over. A list of names scrolled across the screen. The police, reporters, social workers, prosecutors, and even city council members. I saw several familiar titles at a glance. This isn't defense, Erica murmured. This is control. Lucas continued to turn the pages and found that a monitoring module was embedded in one of the codes. This system automatically identifies keywords such as Audubon, manslaughter, investigation, testimony. Once someone mentions it, it will be marked as a potential threat. I clenched my teeth. I see. The cover-up did not end that year, but instead became a more covert form. The gatekeeper is not dead. It just changed its face and continued to operate behind surveillance and databases. They're targeting us too. Erica pointed at the three of us and said, when you left the police station yesterday, did you feel someone was watching you from behind? I recall the moment of chill I felt before I went out that day. Green has already prepared a retreat, I said coldly. At this moment, the phone vibrated. Andre sent a message. Reynolds has been caught, but he insists that he doesn't know who is behind it. I stared at the line of words and a surge of anger rose in my heart. Let's go see him. An hour later, we were facing James Reynolds in a closed conference room at the city's child advocate office. This usually gentle man now looked as pale as paper. I'm not the mastermind, he repeatedly stressed. I'm just following orders. Who gave you the order? I sat opposite him, my tone as cold as a knife. Deputy Director Green. He personally gave the order. Where does Phoenix Eye get its funding from? Ostensibly part of the police department's annual budget. In reality, the funds were funneled through several shell companies, bypassing the audit system, and ultimately returning to the city's special projects account. So Green not only controls the police, but also infiltrates the municipal system. Erica sneered. What a perfect closed loop. Reynolds looked at me with a hint of despair in his eyes. Do you think that revealing the truth will change anything? The existence of Phoenix Eye has never been the responsibility of just one person. Shut up. I threw the printed supervision list in front of him. You are right, but that doesn't mean you can be an accomplice with peace of mind. He lowered his head and stopped talking. On the way back, Lucas kept studying the audio. Claire, he suddenly said. I compared the voice spectrum, and the countdown voice was indeed Green himself. My heart was shocked. That is to say, the entire plan was led by him from the very beginning. Erica was silent for a while, and then said softly, Mark is just a pawn in his hand. The real problem is still up there. I didn't answer, but I knew she was right. This cat-and-mouse game has never been a contest between the murderer and the police. Rather, it is a tool used by some people within the system to maintain order through violence and lies. We thought we were tracking down the murderer, but in fact we were touching upon a larger conspiracy. That night, I came home and my daughter was drawing in her wheelchair. She raised her head and smiled brightly. Mom, I drew a phoenix. I looked at her painting, a bird reborn from the ashes, but with a crack in its eyes. I squatted down and held her in my arms. Mom promises you that I will win this time, but I know that true victory will not appear in court or be written into a report. It starts from the moment when every person like me decides not to remain silent anymore. The next morning, the news channel suddenly reported the deputy mayor of Los Angeles held an emergency press conference to respond to the Phoenix Eye incident. In the camera, Deputy Director James Green was wearing a dark suit and standing in front of the podium with a calm smile on his face. He looked at the camera, his tone steady and firm. "Dear citizens, please do not panic. We are verifying the relevant situation and will handle all issues in accordance with the law." He paused, and his eyes seemed to penetrate the screen, looking directly at me and my team. "Please believe that the Los Angeles Police Department is always on the side of justice." The picture freezes on his calm eyes, but I can see it. That's not remorse, that's a provocation. I closed my laptop, stood up, and grabbed my coat. "Let's go," I said to Erica and Lucas. "It's time to go tell him thank you." They nodded, their eyes firm. Outside, it's raining again. Just like that night 5 years ago. "No modification required," continued. The live broadcast of the press conference at City Hall was played on a loop in the police station's conference room. Green's unapologetic face was reflected in the eyes of Erica, Lucas and me. "He wants to cover up everything with the word efficiency." Erica sneered. "This is the system's self-protection mechanism." "Efficiency?" I repeated, my voice almost squeezing out of my throat. "They are using surveillance to create a cage." At this moment, Lucas suddenly tapped the keyboard. His eyes lit up. I went in. "This is the internal broadcasting system of the City Hall. The countdown synchronization program and the access records of the Phoenix Eye database are all in it." "Well done." I nodded. Now it's time for him to get a taste of being exposed. At the press conference, Green was saying something when the camera suddenly interrupted. Then the full version of the Phoenix Eye watch list began to scroll on the big screen. The reporters suddenly became agitated, and flashlights exploded like a rainstorm. "What is this?" the host exclaimed. "Who hacked into the system? Switch the signal quickly." But it was too late. Every name on the list is a living person who has been labeled as a potential threat and has been tracked, monitored, and marginalized. Now they pour down from the screen like an avalanche, and no one can stop them. Erica and I stood in front of the memorial in Audubon Park, while Lily and Maria gathered in a silent circle with their children. There are 5 names engraved on the stone tablet. The one at the bottom is Amy Reed. "She shouldn't have died," Lily whispered, "but her death has become a shackle for countless people." I pulled out my phone, my finger hovering over the send button. Behind it is the mistake made 5 years ago, and in front of it is the price paid for the silence of countless people. I took a deep breath and pressed the confirm button. The evidence package was like a ray of light, passing through the network directly to the server of the International Human Rights Organization. At that moment I didn't hesitate anymore. The wind blew from the lake, bringing with it the coolness of late autumn and a hint of long-lost clarity. Lucas sent a message. Both CNN and BBC have broadcast the Phoenix Eye list, and several media have begun to contact Reynolds. Erica looked at the kids and said, "We didn't win." I know what she means. The system will not collapse because of an exposure, and justice will not come because of a report. But at least we made a breakthrough. The sunlight shines through the clouds and falls on the memorial plaque, as if the city has finally learned to bow its head and gaze at its own scars. "No," I whispered, "but we've made silence no longer safe." That's the end of tonight's story. Thank you for listening. Have a good sleep. Good night, dear wanderer.